City Lord. As Rocky stepped off the skyship at the skyport of Thunderhawk City, a welcoming party awaited him. Aileen stood at the front, flanked by a group of guards, including Voss himself. Their collective tension eased only when they saw Rocky emerge unscathed from the cabin, particularly Aileen, who had been holding her breath. Aileen had harbored doubts about Rocky's mission from the very beginning. While she acknowledged that his ideas had merit, she had not truly believed he could succeed. In her mind, his safe return was already the best possible outcome. That was precisely why her reaction was one of utter shock when she saw 4 heavy bags being carried off the ship, each filled to the brim with gray rock stones. My lord, could this really be? She hesitated, holding a fist-sized gray rock stone in her palm, turning it over as if expecting it to vanish. Her skeptical gaze flickered toward Voss before she spoke again, her voice dry with disbelief. Could this be gray rock stone? Exactly, Rocky confirmed with a nod. He had expected such a reaction. Aileen had not placed much faith in his success, and truthfully, even he had approached the task with uncertainty. Yet here he stood victorious. Though he remained outwardly composed, a surge of satisfaction ran through him as he witnessed Aileen's astonishment. However, before she could respond, another voice broke the silence. Congratulations to the City Lord on this great victory. Hunting down the Grey Rock Demon. Your military fortune is boundless and enduring. Voss stepped forward, bowing deeply with an expression of profound respect. His words rang loudly, drawing all attention to Rocky. Rocky blinked in surprise. Flattery was not Voss's usual style, making this sudden praise unexpected. He was not alone in his reaction. Aileen and the assembled guards were equally taken aback. The guards, unaware of the exact nature of Rocky's mission, exchanged glances of disbelief. To them, demons were creatures of myth, monsters that had ruled the land for a century, seen as nearly invincible. Yet, their city lord had not only confronted but slain one. Reverence spread across their faces. The weight of Voss's words settled over them, and without realizing it, they all stood taller, their posture shifting from relaxed to disciplined. No one dared to act casually in Rocky's presence anymore. Rocky caught on to Voss's intent instantly. The old strategist had not spoken to flatter him, but to cement his authority in the eyes of the soldiers. Clever old fox. Rocky offered Voss a knowing smile. What are you all standing around for? A commanding voice cut through the moment. Lilia stepped forward, her sharp gaze sweeping over the guards. Take these to the City Lord's mansion. Assign a watch and ensure nothing happens to them. Yes, Captain, the guards responded in unison. Despite her short tenure as captain of the guards, Lilia had already earned the respect of the soldiers. At her command, they immediately set to work, carrying the heavy bags of gray rock stones toward the City Lord's mansion. Each bag required the strength of 3 or 4 men to lift, a stark reminder of how remarkable it was that Rocky and Lilia had transported them alone. As the last bag disappeared into the city, Aileen turned back to Rocky, curiosity flashing in her eyes. City Lord, aren't you coming back with us? Rocky remained where he stood, making no move to follow the procession. Lilia, too, looked puzzled. Wait a moment, he said. Someone else is coming. His gaze shifted to Voss. Lord Voss, I'd like you to stay as well. Of course, Voss replied smoothly, offering a slight smile. He asked no further questions and simply remained at Rocky's side. Minutes later, another skyship broke through the clouds, its form descending toward the skyport. Aileen's brows furrowed in confusion. My lord, who? Thunderhawk City rarely received visitors. Aside from the Chamber of Commerce's periodic trade runs, foreign skyships were an anomaly. For one to appear now was highly unusual. Just a friend I met on land, Rocky answered, a faint smile playing on his lips. Before Aileen could press for more details, Feli, the manager of the skyport, hurried over. City Lord, how should we handle this skyship's arrivals? Under normal circumstances, all incoming vessels had to follow strict procedures, declare their purpose, pay a docking tax, and await clearance before being allowed to land. However, Given the skyship's apparent connection to Rocky, Feli hesitated, unsure of whether exceptions should be made. "Follow standard protocol," Rocky instructed. "Yes, sir." Feli saluted and swiftly departed. Under his command, Monty's skyship docked smoothly, its descent carefully managed. Once the ship was secured, Monty stepped out, his daughter following closely behind. Despite his injuries, the older man carried himself with dignity. His severed arm was properly bandaged now, tended to by his daughter. Without hesitation, Monty approached Rocky and offered a deep bow. "City Lord Rocky, thank you for your help." His daughter mimicked the motion, her voice sincere. "Thank you for saving my father." Their gratitude was not an exaggeration. Although Rocky had only guided them to Thunderhawk City, that simple act had saved Monty's life. Had they been forced to search for a large sky city on their own, Monty's injuries might have become fatal before they could reach medical aid. Rocky, however, dismissed their thanks with a light smile. It was nothing more than lending a hand. Then, shifting his posture slightly, he formally introduced himself. "We should get to know each other properly. I am Rocky, City Lord of Thunderhawk City." Monty straightened, his expression turning solemn. "A pleasure, City Lord Rocky. And you have my eternal gratitude." Rocky simply nodded, sensing that their encounter had only just begun. You are actually..." Rocky's self-introduction, though brief, sent a shockwave through Monty. Monty had always suspected Rocky was no ordinary man, but he never imagined he was a city lord. He had assumed Rocky was a noble of some standing. Yet to learn he ruled the very city they stood upon was beyond anything he had expected. After a brief pause, Monty swiftly pulled his daughter to kneel on one knee. "City Lord, please forgive our earlier disrespect." As a seasoned demon hunter, Monty was not only well-traveled, but also exceptionally perceptive. Upon realizing Rocky was the ruler of Sky City, he immediately adjusted his demeanor. He knew well that in the world of Sky Cities, the City Lord's word was law. Offending Rocky, even unknowingly, could lead to unnecessary trouble for himself and his daughter. No need for such formalities. "Get up." With a casual wave, Rocky gestured for Monty and his daughter to rise. He then turned to Lilia, arranged for a guard to escort them to the city district and ensure they receive proper medical treatment. "Understood?" Lilia nodded and swiftly summoned a guard, instructing him to guide Monty and his daughter away. Only after they were some distance away did Rocky turn to Aileen and Voss. "Aileen, Lord Voss, what are your impressions of this man?" "My lord, this beast man is..." Aileen hesitated. She knew little about Monty and wasn't sure how to respond. Sensing her uncertainty, Rocky recounted his encounter with Monty and explained why he had kept Aileen and Voss behind. He wanted their insight on whether Monty could be useful to him. Aileen understood Rocky's intent, but chose to remain silent, looking to her grandfather instead. Voss nodded. "My lord, this man has value." His words were simple, yet they reassured Rocky. He had sought Voss's opinion precisely because of the elder's keen judgment of people. With that settled, Rocky left the skyport with his entourage. Though eager to recruit Monty, he knew such matters required patience. Monty's injuries meant he would remain in Thunderhawk City for a while, giving Rocky time to observe him further. Besides, Rocky had pressing matters of his own. Now that he had secured the Greyrock Stone, his next priority was reaching Eternal City as soon as possible. Only there could he sell the Greyrock Stone for a significant sum, which was essential for his city's survival. The following day, Rocky summoned Aileen to the City Lord's mansion. "Aileen, how much do you think this batch of Greyrock Stone can sell for? Will it cover Thunderhawk City's grain expenses?" Securing food had been a constant struggle for Thunderhawk City. Every move Rocky had made so far had been to resolve this problem. Now it was time to see the results. "My lord, it's more than enough." Her straightforward response made Rocky exhale in relief. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely." Aileen smiled. "City Lord, the current market price of Greyrock Stone is around 15 gold coins per kilogram. Based on the weight you brought back, we should earn over 10,000 gold coins. That sum, combined with our reserves, will be sufficient to purchase winter provisions, even if the Azure Commerce Guild inflates their prices. We will even have a surplus." As Thunderhawk City's financial officer, Eileen's expertise was unmatched. The moment Rocky had returned with the Greyrock Stone, she had worked through the night gathering market data. Her calculations were precise. Rocky finally felt at ease. The immediate crisis was over. However, another concern lingered in his mind. Aileen, must we continue importing food from the Azure Commerce Guild? Aileen paused, quickly understanding Rocky's underlying intent. He was dissatisfied with the Azure Commerce Guild and sought alternatives. Given their last trade, Rocky's frustration was justified. The Azure Commerce Guild had taken advantage of Thunderhawk City, exploiting their desperate need for supplies by raising prices unfairly. The deal had gone through only because Rocky had no other choice at the time. Now, however, with sufficient funds, he had options. After considering for a moment, Aileen spoke. If you wish to change trading partners, City Lord, this trip to Eternal City is the perfect opportunity. It is the largest trade hub in the skies, home to countless commerce guilds. We can assess the market and explore new alliances. Rocky nodded in agreement. That was my thought as well. His visit to Eternal City wasn't just about selling the Greyrock Stone. It was about breaking free from the Azure Commerce Guild's monopoly. Jiaxi's arrogance had left a sour taste in Rocky's mouth. The way they had treated Thunderhawk City, like a minor pawn, was unacceptable. Now, with the financial means to dictate terms, he saw no reason to continue dealing with them. However, Aileen raised a crucial point. City Lord, if we cut ties with the Azure Commerce Guild, we must also secure a new supplier for yarn. The Azure Commerce Guild controlled both food and textile imports. Their willingness to trade was conditional on Thunderhawk City purchasing both from them. If Rocky severed the food trade, he would also need an alternative yarn supplier. Rocky had already considered this. His goal wasn't just to replace one guild with another. It was to initiate true change for Thunderhawk City. Understood. That's why Eternal City will be crucial, he replied. It's time for Thunderhawk City to establish its own path forward.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Thunderhawk City. It was time for some changes, Rocky thought. Regarding his identity as the City Lord, Rocky was filled with contradictions. Although this status provided him with a better starting point than others, it also brought him immense pressure, and being the City Lord of Thunderhawk City only increased that burden substantially. The frailty of Thunderhawk City was evident to anyone. A small city with merely 1,000 inhabitants, it lacked virtually everything: industry, commerce, military, and so on. If there were such a thing as a development index in this world, Thunderhawk cities would undoubtedly be zero. Under such circumstances, Rocky believed that it was essential for Thunderhawk City to change. Now, with the unique technology of mana runes at his disposal, Rocky's potential was boundless. Therefore, he had to ensure the development and strengthening of Thunderhawk City. Only with a powerful Thunderhawk City could he truly take advantage of the benefits of mana runes. But how exactly could he strengthen Thunderhawk City? Rocky pondered this question for a long time and finally arrived at an answer: the economy. The economy was the key. For a city to develop, whether it was Sky City or any city on land, the economy was paramount because it was the foundation of everything. Without it, all else was empty talk. So, if Rocky wanted to make Thunderhawk City strong, he naturally had to focus on the economy first. The first thing he thought of was that Thunderhawk City could no longer rely solely on the textile industry for its livelihood. The city had a small population and no real factories. The so-called textile industry was entirely based on manual labor. The idea that a Sky City's economic lifeline was hand-woven fabric was laughably absurd. Rocky believed that the economic lifeline of Thunderhawk City must shift to other industries, or even directly to the market. Only then could the city's economy improve. Next, it was imperative to change the economic model of Thunderhawk City. At present, Thunderhawk City was still functioning under a planned economy, with all resource allocation decisions being made and distributed by the City Lord's Mansion. Take the textile industry, for example. Each quarter, the City Lord's Mansion would decide how much yarn to import. Then, they would sell the yarn to the residents at a set price. Once the residents weave the yarn into fabric, The city lord's mansion bought it back at a predetermined price and sold the fabric to the Chamber of Commerce. In this process, the city lord's mansion was in charge of everything, and the residents only had to labor and earn a margin to make an income. This was a classic example of a planned economy. This economic model had too many drawbacks. Without shifting to a free market economy, Thunderhawk City could never develop. Rocky saw his upcoming trip to Eternal City as an opportunity and hoped to use it to kickstart the reforms for Thunderhawk City. With this in mind, he summoned Eileen the day after and shared his thoughts with her. After all, as the financial officer of Thunderhawk City, she understood economic matters far better than Rocky did. "My lord, I think I understand what you mean." After Rocky laid out his thoughts to Aileen, she fell into deep contemplation. After a while, she finally spoke. "My lord, your ideas are indeed excellent, and Thunderhawk City does need to change. It's just that." "Just what?" "We can't rush things." After looking at Rocky, Eileen said, "My lord, the residents of Thunderhawk City have already become accustomed to the economic model you mentioned. Planned economy. NOVLB //JNN. Yes, that's right, the planned economy." Aileen felt that the term was very accurate. The residents are already accustomed to the planned economy you mentioned. If you suddenly change this model and connect Thunderhawk City's market with the external markets, the residents won't be able to withstand the impact, and that could lead to significant turmoil. So what do you suggest? Eileen's words were entirely correct, and also what Rocky was worried about. Although changes were necessary for Thunderhawk City, Rocky was afraid that the residents wouldn't be able to accept them. This was precisely why he sought Eileen's counsel. "My lord, we can take it slowly, allowing the residents to gradually adapt." Aileen was sharp. After hearing Rocky's ideas, she quickly grasped the key points and thought of a solution: to let the residents of Thunderhawk City gradually adapt. It may have sounded like an obvious statement, but it wasn't. This was because the population of Thunderhawk City was too small. But with a small population, adapting to changes could be swift. If Thunderhawk City had a population not of 1,000, but of 100,000, adapting to new changes would prove challenging. Fortunately, with only about 1,000 residents, adapting them to new changes would be much simpler. After saying this, Aileen laid out her thoughts to Rocky one by one. In the following days, the two of them discussed the matter extensively, deliberating on how to initiate change in Thunderhawk City and help its residents adapt to these changes. As a result, a week passed quickly, and by the end of it, Rocky and Aileen had crafted a fairly comprehensive plan for the economic reforms of Thunderhawk City, ready to be implemented upon arrival in Eternal City. Following this, Lilia sought out Rocky and informed him that Monty had been discharged from the hospital. Since he had been busy preparing for the economic reforms of Thunderhawk City, Rocky had almost forgotten about the Beastman. It was only after Lilia's reminder that he remembered. "Has his injury already healed? Is it possible to recover that quickly? He's broken an arm. It won't heal for 3 to 5 months, Lilia said with a shake of her head and an exasperated look before suggesting, "Shall I go talk to him?" Both Rocky and Lilia valued the Beastman Monty highly, despite his current disability. They still saw him as talented, at least the talent Thunderhawk City needed. His strength and his experience were valuable assets in Thunderhawk City. Hence, if they could recruit him, it would only benefit Rocky. However, with Monty healing and Rocky occupied, they had not had a chance to meet. Now that Monty was not only out of the hospital, but they were also about to arrive in Eternal City, there was little time left to speak with him before he potentially left. After contemplating for a moment, Rocky shook his head, stood up, and said, "I'll go talk to him myself. It shows more sincerity that way." Rocky planned to personally meet with Monty to see if he could persuade the Beastman to stay under his command. As for his approach, Lilia naturally gave her full support. Since their goal was to recruit Monty, it was undoubtedly a sign of sincere commitment for Rocky, the Lord of one city, to meet with Monty himself, which was certainly much more effective than having someone else make the visit. Thus, shortly after, Rocky and Lilia left the city lord's mansion and took a carriage to the city district. Monty had not met with Rocky since coming to Thunderhawk City, but Rocky was well aware of his movements. First, because Thunderhawk City wasn't large, and Monty had few places to go, and second, because Lilia had already instructed the patrolling guards to pay close attention to his whereabouts. So after leaving the city lord's mansion, they rode the carriage directly to the inn where Monty was staying and arrived shortly after. "City Lord, how come you're here?" When Monty opened the door to his inn room and saw Rocky standing before him, the tall beast man was completely stunned, clearly not expecting to see the city lord again. "What? Not pleased to see me?" Observing the dumbfounded Monty, Rocky jokingly remarked. Unfortunately, he forgot the status difference between himself and Monty, for the beastman's face turned sour in an instant upon hearing his words. "My lord, I beg forgiveness. I didn't mean it like that." In the midst of speaking, Monty hurriedly moved aside his towering figure and invited Rocky and Lilia into the room. "City Lord, hello." As Rocky entered the room, he immediately heard an exceedingly crisp greeting. Looking towards the source, he saw Monty's daughter, the young female beastman. Monty's daughter seemed to be only about 14 or 15 years old, but because she was a beastman, her appearance and figure were almost on par with Lilia. She now greeted Rocky with enthusiasm. "Hello." Rocky nodded slightly to Monty's daughter and smiled. "Dusa, stop fooling around." Monty, following behind Rocky, scolded his daughter for her lack of manners. "Go back to your room. Don't bother the city lord here." "Oh." Scolded by her father, Dusa pouted, lowered her head, and then reluctantly returned to her room. Though she closed the door, she still left a crack open and peeked out at the outside. "Monty, no need to be so nervous. I just came to check on your injuries." Ignoring Dusa's little antics, Rocky glanced at Monty and then said with a smile, "City Lord, please have a seat." However, no matter how much Rocky said to relax, Monty couldn't possibly do so. He hurriedly offered Rocky a seat and stood without sitting himself. "You sit too. No need to be so formal." Only after Rocky's repeated requests did Monty finally take a seat opposite him, still appearing quite constrained. "How are your injuries?" Seeing that Monty remained tense, Rocky couldn't take it anymore and simply started to chat with him. "Thank you for your concern, my lord. My injuries are no longer a concern." "That's good." Upon hearing this, Rocky nodded and then glanced at Monty's severed arm, which had been bandaged up and clearly received professional medical treatment. It indeed seemed no longer to be a major issue. Rocky then shifted his gaze back to Monty's face, looked at him for a moment, and asked, "Monty, do you still plan to continue being a demon hunter? n/o/vel/b//and.c//on." This? Monty was taken aback by Rocky's sudden question. Then he gave a wry smile and shook his head. "My lord, in my current state, I don't think I'll be able to hunt demons anymore." As he spoke, he unconsciously touched his severed arm and sighed. His arm had been severed, and although he received timely treatment and would heal after a period of rest, he could no longer be a demon hunter. "What are your plans for the future?" Monty's answer was entirely within Rocky's expectations, so after a slight pause, he spoke again. At this question, Monty, who had previously been somewhat confused, immediately understood why Rocky had come to see him and why he was asking these questions. Thus, after thinking for a while, Monty spoke again. "My lord, my daughter, and I have some savings, so I haven't made any plans for now." "Then, would you be interested in staying with me?" At this point in the conversation, Rocky stopped beating around the bush and directly entered the main topic, plainly stating his purpose in coming. "My lord, I haven't considered that," Monty replied. Looking at Rocky, his response was very tactful. This answer was effectively giving Rocky a response that he did not plan to stay in Thunderhawk City. This truly reflected Monty's thoughts. He had been living in Thunderhawk City for several days, and although he spent most of that time in the hospital, he had already learned a lot about the city and knew exactly what it was like. Monty felt that such a city was too small for him. Indeed, just as Lilia had estimated before, Monty was a 5th level, or even on the verge of breaking through to 6th level warrior before his injury. Even now, with only one arm, he still had the strength of at least a 4th level warrior, which was not considered low. With such strength, Monty might not be able to hunt demons, but he could certainly find a job in any sky city to support his family, and that was absolutely not a problem. If that was the case, why should he live in such a small city as Thunderhawk City? Monty, who had traveled far and wide, had visited many medium and large sky cities. In those cities, he could ensure a good life for himself and his daughter without any need to stay in Thunderhawk City. However, that was just what he thought internally. He couldn't say it out loud. After all, even though Rocky was just the lord of a small city, he was still the city lord, and the difference in status made Monty express his thoughts as tactfully as possible. That's roughly what I was thinking. What Monty didn't expect was that Rocky, upon hearing his tactful response, did not show displeasure but smiled as if he had anticipated it. Following this, Rocky opened his mouth to say, "Monty, you think Thunderhawk City is too small, right?" "My lord, I absolutely did not." Monty quickly shook his head in denial. If he agreed now, he would really be a fool. However, Rocky simply waved his hand to interrupt him, then said, "Monty, is that the only ambition you have for your futures?" "Do you think that now you can only serve as a guard for some minor noble or find a menial job in a guild, and that's it?" Rocky's words stunned Monty on the spot. He couldn't speak for a long time because most of his thoughts were precisely what Rocky had articulated. When he said he hadn't made any plans for the future, it was just to brush off Rocky. How could Monty not plan for his future, especially since he was also a father? His plans were indeed, as Rocky said, intending to head to a large sky city, then become the guard for some noble there. With his abilities, achieving this would not be difficult, even with one arm lost. He believed that with his current conditions, if he could live such a life, that would be fairly good. The earnings from being a guard would be enough to support him and his daughter, with some left over to save for the future. When his daughter reached adulthood, he could find a good family for her to marry into, and that would complete his life. Those were Monty's thoughts. No lofty ambitions, just solid and realistic ones. Clearly, Rocky didn't see it that way. So he then said, "Monty, you indeed cannot go hunting demons anymore, but this might not be a bad thing. Rather, it could be an opportunity. I hope you can stay here with me. Believe me, following me will be much better than serving some minor noble." "My lord, I really haven't made up my mind," Monty replied. Rocky's words were straightforward but also sincere, a sentiment Monty could feel. He even felt slightly persuaded, but this was, after all, a significant matter, and he needed to consider it carefully. "No problem. I hope you think it over and give me your answer later," Rocky said with a slight smile, not seeming to rush. "We will arrive at Eternal City in 2 more days. You can leave at any time, and I won't stop you. But I hope you can wait and give me some time, because you will soon witness the transformation of Thunderhawk City. Once that happens, it won't be too late to make your decision." After his chat with Monty, Rocky brought Lilia back to the City Lord's mansion. In his view, this meeting with Monty had been a success because he had said all he could, and it was apparent that Monty had been touched. Rocky felt that was enough. However, in the eyes of some, his meeting with Monty had not been successful at all, and it had yielded nothing, since he had not convinced Monty to become his subordinate. The reason was quite simple. What Rocky could offer now was just too little. Even so, Rocky still believed he had moved Monty, because he had seen reluctance in Monty's eyes. Although this beast man had lost an arm and repeatedly said he would be content to live a peaceful life, his gaze was still filled with unwillingness. This reluctance made Rocky feel that there was still something to discuss with Monty. His thought was correct, because Monty was indeed very reluctant, and it was this reluctance that made him not immediately reject Rocky. This was actually quite easy to understand. Monty had been a warrior on the verge of breaking through to the 6th level, a strength already considered very formidable, and this was precisely why he had chosen the dangerous profession of a demon hunter. Under such circumstances, how could Monty, having lost an arm, be willing to lead an inconsequential life? So, although he did not agree to Rocky's proposal immediately, Monty also did not refuse him. Moreover, he did not plan to leave Thunderhawk City immediately, since Rocky had mentioned that Thunderhawk City would soon undergo changes. Monty wanted to stay and see what the city would become, then make his decision when the time came. Therefore, overall, the conversation between Rocky and Monty went quite smoothly. Rocky ultimately convinced Monty to stay in Thunderhawk City, and as long as Monty stayed, he believed that with the Beastman's insight and experience, Monty would definitely make the right choice after witnessing the forthcoming changes in Thunderhawk City. Following this, upon returning to the City Lord's mansion, Rocky immediately became busy again. They were about to reach Eternal City, and there were still many things he needed to prepare. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. After slowly flying through the sky for more than a month, Thunderhawk City finally arrived at its destination. Eternal City. Rocky had long heard of this god city, so he was excited to go to the skyport early in the morning with Lilia and Aileen. This is Eternal City. Standing on the skyport platform, initially prepared to board a skyship directly to Eternal City, Rocky was stunned. Just by standing on the platform of the skyport, he had already clearly seen Eternal City in the distance and was utterly astonished. How could this city be so large? Standing in the skyport of Thunderhawk City and gazing into the distance, Rocky could see a giant city floating in the sky. The scale of this city was so immense it almost filled his entire field of vision. Considering that Thunderhawk City was not actually close to Eternal City, being separated by several thousand meters at least, from such a distance, and yet Eternal City was still so massive. One could only imagine how magnificent this city was. God City, truly as legendary as its name. Standing in the skyport and looking for a while, Rocky couldn't help but inwardly exclaim. The name God City truly wasn't for naught. The city before his eyes indeed qualified as a colossal entity. Have all the goods been loaded onto the ship? Gradually coming back to his senses, Rocky turned to look at Aileen and then asked, "Everything is ready." Rocky's main purpose for traveling to Eternal City this time was for trade. On the one hand, he wanted to sell the Greyrock stone he possessed, and on the other hand, he needed to find a chamber of commerce that could supply food to Thunderhawk City, along with some other minor affairs. Thus, Aileen became crucial for this trip, with all trading matters being her responsibility. Board the ship to Eternal City. Seeing that everything was in order, Rocky waved his hand excitedly and then led everyone onto the skyship, preparing to head to Eternal City. "My lord, please wait a moment." Just at that moment, just after Rocky had boarded the skyship and before it could take off, a thunderous shout came across. It immediately drew everyone's attention. Following the direction of the voice, it didn't take long for them to see a tall figure appearing at the skyport. It was the Beastman Monty. It didn't take much longer for Monty to sprint over to Rocky's skyship, and then he called out, "My lord, are you going to trade Greyrock stone this time?" "Yes. My lord, I have been to Eternal City many times and am very familiar with it. I can help you." "Really? That would be great." Having Monty come to him proactively was something Rocky hadn't anticipated at all, and naturally, he was very pleased. Actually, Rocky had thought about asking Monty for help earlier because, being a certified demon hunter, Monty was surely more familiar with demon-related trades than Aileen was. Having his assistance would make things much easier. However, considering Monty's injuries, Rocky had ultimately refrained from asking. Yet here the Beastman was, coming forward of his own accord. It must be said that Monty the Beastman was indeed impressive. Despite having traveled far and wide and witnessed much of the world, he had not forgotten the simple honesty typical of Beastmen. This made his respect and gratitude for Rocky not only that of a commoner towards a city lord, but also deeper and more personal. In Monty's view, no matter Rocky's status, he had once saved his life, an act of kindness Monty always remembered. So even if Rocky wasn't a lord, Monty's attitude towards him would not change much, and he would definitely repay the favor. Although Rocky was delighted by Monty's initiative, thinking about his injuries still made him unavoidably concerned. "Are your injuries all right? N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. They're mostly healed." Swinging his half-arm bandaged up, the Beastman laughed heartily, indicating that there were no problems at all. The physical resilience of Beastmen was indeed formidable. If a human had suffered injuries as severe as his, it would typically take months to recover. However, Monty had rested for only a week and was already quite healed. Seeing this, Rocky simply nodded and then waved to Monty, "Come aboard." And so, Monty also boarded the skyship, and once he was aboard, Rocky ordered the skyship to slowly ascend and flew toward Eternal City. The skyship ascended and slowly flew out of Thunderhawk City's defensive net, then headed towards the distant Eternal City. Lilia, look over there. Standing at the bow, Rocky was once again just as excited as the first time he'd taken a skyship. But who could blame him? For in just this short journey he had seen so many sights he'd never experienced before. For instance, at this very moment he was pointing astoundedly at a vast sky city in the distance. This sky city was not the Eternal City, but rather it was smaller in scale than the Eternal City, yet significantly larger than Thunderhawk City. And it was not far from Thunderhawk City at all, with roughly a kilometer separating the two. And as Rocky looked out, he realized that there were dozens of sky cities stationed several thousand kilometers around the Eternal City. These sky cities varied in size. The smallest were similar to Thunderhawk City, but most were medium to large sky cities. Such an astonishing sight was something Rocky had never seen before, so it was no wonder he was exclaiming excitedly at the bow. Not just him. Even Lilia and Eileen had their mouths wide open, displaying expressions of disbelief at the scene before them. Out of the group, only Monty appeared relatively composed, for Rocky, Lilia, and Eileen had only heard of the great name of the Eternal City, but were visiting for the first time, whereas Monty was not. He had visited many times before, so the sight before him was nothing unusual. Monty, are all these sky cities here to trade with the Eternal City like us? Seeing Monty standing there calmly, Rocky quickly asked him since he knew much more about the Eternal City than Rocky did. Yes, my lord. Monty nodded and then explained in detail to Rocky. My lord, sky cities like these are always present around the Eternal City at every moment, and this is even not the busiest time. During certain important days, the surrounding area of the Eternal City might see over 100 sky cities, and the scene is truly magnificent. It's that extravagant. Monty's words made Rocky take a deep breath. He tried to imagine, but ultimately, he simply couldn't picture what it would be like with over 100 sky cities around the Eternal City. It was beyond his imagination. Meanwhile, as the skyship gradually neared the Eternal City, more and more skyships appeared in the sky. These skyships came in various sizes, and there were civilian ships, merchant vessels, and even warships, bustling in the sky like lively fish, some flying far away, others heading to the nearby sky cities, all very busy. Just as Rocky was being amazed by this spectacle, a small skyship, no, a hoverboat, approached them. There were only 2 people on the hoverboat, but both were wearing void magic armor. As Rocky noticed the hoverboat drawing near, it had already approached closely, and then he saw one of the people on the boat use their floating armor to fly up into the air and gently float alongside Rocky's skyship. Good morning, sirs and madam. I am a patrol officer from the Eternal City. May I ask if you are here for trade? This NOVLB //JNN. The patrol officer's question stumped Rocky as it was his first visit to the Eternal City, and he was still unclear about the local rules and regulations. What was even more important was that when the patrol officer approached, Rocky's attention was completely captivated by the void magic armor he was wearing. He had never imagined that someone who was merely a patrol officer would be equipped with void magic armor, much less armor that was clearly superior to his own set. Heavens! The financial strength of Eternal City was simply too much, being able to supply such high-quality void magic armor to a mere patrol officer. With such lavish spending, even Rocky, a city lord himself, was left speechless. We are visiting Eternal City for the first time, asked Eileen. Are there any differences for trade? As Rocky's pride was deeply wounded by the seemingly insignificant patrol officer, Eileen beside him asked the officer, as they indeed didn't quite understand what the other party had just mentioned. Oh, if you're here for trade, then please dock your skyship at the trade port. If not, head to the general port. The port entry taxes are different for each, and only skyships docked at the trade port are allowed to load cargo. General ports do not permit this. If anyone is found breaking these rules, they will be treated as smuggling and subject to heavy fines. Please comply with the regulations of Eternal City. So that's how it is? After hearing the patrol officer's explanation, Aileen glanced at Monty, and only after seeing him nod slightly to her did she feel assured. "We are here for trade." "Okay." Upon hearing Eileen's response, the patrol officer immediately said, "The trade tax in Eternal City is 50 gold coins per day for each small skyship. The total tax is to be paid upon departure. Please steer your skyship to these coordinates to queue for entry." While speaking, the patrol officer clad in floating armor gave Aileen a set of coordinates and then flew away without looking back. Why is the entry tax so expensive? After passing the coordinates to the guard on the ship, Aileen pouted unhappily, her face showing clear distress, evidently finding the entry tax exorbitant. A port entry tax of 50 gold coins a day. If they were to stay for 10 days, that would amount to 500 gold coins in taxes. That was just too expensive. City Lord, it looks like we can't afford to waste any time. The steep entry tax forced Aileen to turn to Rocky, as they certainly couldn't afford a long stay in Eternal City. "All right." A shaken Rocky finally snapped back to his senses, then nodded. Not long after that, their skyship slowly flew toward the patrol officers given coordinates and began to queue for entry. Upon reaching the skyport of Eternal City, Rocky and the others were once again astounded, as the skyport of Eternal City was simply too vast. My heavens! This port is even bigger than Thunderhawk City's entire district. As the skyship slowly descended, Rocky, standing at the bow, couldn't help but exclaim in shock because the scale of Eternal City's skyport was overwhelming, surpassing even the district size of Thunderhawk City. In this enormous skyport, there were hundreds of skyships docked, with dozens or even hundreds taking off or landing in the port at any given moment, making the entire area extremely busy. Such a scale of skyport thoroughly stunned Rocky. Thunderhawk City also had a skyport, but compared to Eternal City's skyport, Thunderhawk's was nothing more than a small platform. There was absolutely no comparison. Is this the might of a god city? Seeing just a glimpse of Eternal City's skyport was enough for Rocky to understand the tremendous power of Eternal City. No wonder this city had become the largest trade center in the skies, and no wonder the top 10 divine cities positioned alongside Eternal City were known as the 10 monsters of the sky. Their strength was simply staggering. After the skyship landed at the skyport of Eternal City, Rocky and his companions found a carriage and then headed to the city district of Eternal City. Since it was a trading city, the skyport of Eternal City was very close to the city district, and a half-hour carriage ride brought them inside the city area. Upon arriving in the city district, Rocky's first impression was of its bustling activity. It was indeed a super metropolis with a population of millions, where the streets and alleys were filled with throngs of people, making it extraordinarily lively. And the second impression it left him with was its prosperity. The prosperity of Eternal City far exceeded Rocky's imagination. He even saw 7 or 8-story buildings for the first time here. You must know that in Thunderhawk City, the tallest building was his City Lord's mansion, which is merely a 2-story castle. But in this place, structures bigger and more luxurious than Rocky's City Lord's mansion were everywhere, with some restaurants almost rivaling the scale of his mansion. Such a vibrant and colorful sight gave Rocky a huge shock, suddenly making him feel like a country bumpkin who had finally arrived in the big city for the first time, having never seen anything like it. In fact, his thinking was a bit too self-deprecating. Eternal City was indeed very prosperous, and this prosperity was indeed something Thunderhawk City could not compare with, but this was only limited to a comparison between Thunderhawk City and Eternal City. In reality, the level of prosperity in Eternal City was among the top throughout the entire sky. Not to mention the feeble Thunderhawk City, other sky cities could not compare to it either, including the large sky cities, which also could not compete with Eternal City in terms of prosperity. One day, I will make Thunderhawk City like this. Sitting in the carriage, watching the bustle of the street traffic, Rocky felt not only envy, but also made a secret resolution. He was determined to build his Thunderhawk City to be just like this, no, even more prosperous than Eternal City. In this manner, the carriage moved on. After entering the city district, it didn't take long before they arrived at their destination, a reasonably sized hotel. This hotel was recommended by Monty not too expensive, and very close to the trade center within the city district. Monty would stay here every time he came to Eternal City. Regarding where to stay, be it Rocky, Lilia, or even Aileen, none of them were particularly concerned, because they were well aware that they didn't come to Eternal City for pleasure, even though it was also the best entertainment city in the entire sky. Monty, would you mind taking us to the hunting exchange now? After selecting 2 rooms at the hotel, Rocky said to Monty, asking him to take them directly to the Hunters Guild. The so-called hunting exchange was actually a large market specializing in demon trades. All buying and selling activities regarding demons took place there, with numerous sellers and buyers making transactions very convenient. My lord, don't you want to rest for a bit? Glancing at Rocky, Monty did not expect him to be in such a hurry. Indeed, Rocky was in a rush. You must understand that for every day they stayed in the city district, the skyship parked at the skyport had to pay a docking fee of 50 gold coins, a substantial amount for the cash-strapped Rocky, so he had no intention of wasting any time here. Under these circumstances, soon after arriving at the hotel, the group almost immediately left again, and then they took the carriage straight to the hunting exchange. You have to say, the hotel recommended by Monty might not look fancy, but its location was really good. They arrived at their destination in just about 15 minutes. My lord, this is the hunting exchange. After getting off the carriage, Monty pointed across the street, and Rocky and his companions crossed the bustling thoroughfare to see a trading house 5 stories high and twice the size of Rocky's city lord's mansion. Good heavens, this place is really massive. Having glanced at the trading house, Rocky couldn't help but click his tongue, not having expected it to be so grand. My lord, this is Eternal City, where all demon hunters under the entire sky, if able, choose to conduct their business because there are also the most buyers here. Moreover, any transaction is supervised and guaranteed by Eternal City, and any issues will be handled by Eternal City as well. Therefore, the trading house here is naturally quite large. I see. After listening to Monty's explanation, Rocky nodded and then led his group across the wide street, heading straight for the trading house. Upon entering the trading house's lobby, what first came into view was a man and notice board, so large one had to tilt their head back to see it all. It was over 10 meters in size, with dense, scrolling notices which, upon closer inspection as Rocky and his company drew near, turned out to be all transaction information. Times Chamber of Commerce is offering a high price for Sky Antelope Demon Horn. Interested parties, please contact the Chamber's representative. Times. Price negotiable. Times Chamber of Commerce is buying various demon cores in bulk, fair price assured. Interested parties are welcome to discuss details at Trading House's 2nd floor in Times shop. A large quantity of Earth Dragon Demon skin for sale. For price inquiries, please contact Times. Long-term purchase of Greyrock Stone. Price negotiable. Interested parties are welcome to the 2nd floor of the Trading House to discuss and shop. Times. The scrolling notices on the board were all about demon-related transactions, including postings from buyers and sellers alike, their numbers so great it was dizzying to behold. And beneath the notice board there were also many people like Rocky and his allies, looking up at it attentively. It was clear from the way these individuals were dressed that they were unmistakably not merchants. And if not merchants, then they must naturally be demon hunters here for business. The trading house is too big, so this notice board was set up to facilitate trading for everyone. While Rocky was dazzled by the contents of the notice board, Monty at his side explained, these messages are being updated every moment. Hunters who come here to sell demons need only follow this information to find merchants to quickly complete transactions, which is very convenient. Monty, none of the information on here specifies prices. Do all merchants operate this way? At that moment, Aileen turned her head and inquired of Monty. That should be the case. But Monty awkwardly scratched his big head when asked, actually, I'm not too sure either. Each time I come here to trade, I go directly to the merchants based on the information on the notice board. So I've never paid much attention. In /o/vel/b//and.c//om. Although Monty was much smarter than the average beastman, he still retained some typical characteristics of beastmen, such as being very straightforward and finding calculative affairs bothersome. Like the question Aileen had just posed, a matter he had never considered before. In Monty's eyes, as long as he could sell the demons he hunted, what did it matter if the price was a little higher or lower? After all, he was earning either way. After hearing his response, Eileen nodded and then looked at Rocky. "Lord, please wait here for a moment. I want to check the trading information." Having said this, Eileen no longer paid heed to the others and took out a small notebook from her pocket. She stood under the notice board, swiftly browsing through the ceaselessly scrolling information and incessantly jotting something down in her notebook. It was evident that upon arriving, Eileen was somewhat excited, and now she was preparing to make her move. Eileen was indeed very excited now, for she had an innate sensitivity to all transactions. After asking Monty a few questions, she began to take action. However, this meant that Rocky and his companions had nothing to do, and even Monty was in the same situation. Although he was familiar with the place, he was far inferior to Eileen, the business expert, and was of no help at all. In this situation, Rocky made a suggestion. "Monty, could you show us around? Besides purchasing demons, the merchants here should also sell them, right?" "My lord, yes," Monty nodded, then said, "This exchange almost gathers all buyers and sellers pertaining to demons. If my lord needs anything, you will definitely find it here." During their conversation, he led Rocky and Lilia deeper into the hall and then up the stairs to the second floor of the exchange. The hunting exchange was 5 stories tall. The first-floor hall mainly handled information dissemination and account settlements, while from the second floor onward, there were independent storefronts of various merchants. Just as Monty said, there were both buyers and sellers within this exchange. Besides demon hunters who came here to sell demons, many also came here to buy demons. Of course, those who came to buy demons would not purchase a whole demon, but certain parts, such as the demon's horn, demon skin, or the demon core, and so on. n/o/vel/b//gin.c//om. In this state of affairs, when Rocky entered the second floor under Monty's guidance, he quickly saw the separate storefronts, which instantly gave him the feeling of browsing through a shopping mall, and it felt like a luxury shopping mall at that. "What is this?" Rocky entered a shop casually and immediately noticed a long horn displayed inside the counter. The horn was gray-white in color, nearly 1.5 meters in length, but straight as a ruler, which was quite unusual. So after looking at it for a while at the counter, Rocky couldn't help but ask, "My lord, this is a horn from a wild poison demon, extremely hard. With just simple polishing, it can be directly made into a weapon or even inlaid with magic stones to become a mana weapon," Monty explained. "The hunter is correct," said a man who walked out of the shop. Judging by his dress, he appeared to be the owner. Approaching Rocky, the man continued, "My lord, this indeed is the horn of the wild poison. The most valuable part of the wild poison demon is this very horn. It is a top choice for making magic energy weapons. As a merchant, the owner naturally had an eye for judging people, so he recognized at first glance that Rocky was no ordinary individual. Therefore, he was very enthusiastic. However, that was normal. Although Rocky's attire wasn't particularly lavish, he was after all the city lord, and he did have several high-end noble garments. Additionally, being the lord of a city, his natural demeanor set him apart from common folk, so it was not surprising for his extraordinary status to be noticed. "Why is this horn particularly suitable for making mana weapons?" Rocky, evidently intrigued by the owner's pitch, couldn't help but inquire further. Hearing his question, the owner became even more certain of Rocky's uncommon status, for the more noble one's identity, the less they knew about demons. Subsequently, the owner said, "My lord, the horn of the wild poison has the strongest adaptability to mana among low-level demons, with excellent conductivity. Thus, mana weapons made from this horn are at least 10% more powerful than ordinary mana weapons. It has such an effect? How much is this horn?" Rocky nodded, asking casually about the price of the horn of the wild poison. 15,000 gold coins. Seeing that Rocky had inquired about the price, the shop owner cheerfully put forth a figure. However, that number nearly gave Rocky a scare. Just one horn, and it costs 15,000 gold coins? Such a high price was far beyond Rocky's expectations, and even left him at a loss for words. Luckily, at that moment, there was a heavy sigh from behind, followed by Monty's voice. "My lord, perhaps we should look in other shops." "All right." Upon hearing Monty's suggestion, Rocky promptly agreed and then walked away without looking back, his decisiveness catching the shop owner off guard. Actually, he genuinely took an interest in the horn of the wild poison. Since the horn provided a boost to the mana from magic stones, he wondered if it would also enhance mana runes. So he wanted to purchase the horn for experimentation, but he never expected it to be so expensive. He had assumed that the horn would cost around 1,000 gold coins, which, even though not cheap for him, was still affordable if he tightened his belt. To his surprise, the price of the horn of the wild poison exceeded his estimate by more than tenfold. Splurging thousands of gold coins on such a demon horn was simply beyond what Rocky could afford. So he left using Monty's interjection as an opportunity. "Monty, was that horn of the wild poison really worth 15,000 gold coins?" Rocky asked, still somewhat reluctant to let it go. He really wanted to get his hands on it. After leaving the aforementioned shop, a slightly discontented Rocky questioned Monty. He was indeed very interested in purchasing the horn of the wild poison. "My lord, the horn of the wild poison is indeed a fine material for crafting mana weapons, but it's not worth that much," the shopkeeper said. The store owner must have sensed your noble status and purposely quoted a high price. "In fact, if you really want it, you could find it for no more than 8,000 gold coins." 8,000 gold coins? This number crushed Rocky's hopes entirely. Although 8,000 gold coins was nearly half the price of 15,000 gold coins, it was still well beyond Rocky's budget. Of course, he could produce 8,000 gold coins, but he would never spend so much for a single demon's horn. So, with no other option, Rocky had to completely give up on the horn of the wild poison and then walked into another store. Afterward, he, Lilia, and Monty started browsing through the hunting exchange, stopping at different stores along the way. They may not have bought much, but the experience gave Rocky a general idea of the market prices for demon trades and exposed him to a wide range of goods. It must be said, all trades related to demons were incredibly lucrative. Items like the horn of the wild poison were commonplace here, each commanding prices upwards of 10,000 gold coins, and even the more common ones cost several thousand gold coins. For Rocky, who wished to purchase something here, such steep prices were both a good and a bad thing. He did not have tens of thousands of gold coins to spend on these items. Rocky had set a maximum spending limit for himself of just 1,000 gold coins. That was the limit he could afford. Actually, 1,000 gold coins was not a small sum. It could even buy a piece of top-quality magic energy equipment, but sadly, it was nowhere nearly enough here. However, since items related to demons could be sold at such exorbitant prices, Rocky was filled with anticipation about how much he could sell his Greyrock stone for. Previously, Aileen had conservatively estimated that the Greyrock stone could be sold for more than 10,000 gold coins, but this was just a forecast based on what she heard from other merchants. The actual price would depend on the market at the hunting exchange. This filled Rocky with anticipation, so even though he couldn't afford anything here, he remained cheerful and, before he knew it, he had unconsciously wandered up to the third floor of the exchange. According to Monty, the items sold in the exchange became progressively more expensive and high-end with each floor. By the time one reached the fifth floor, it was all about high-level demon items, where any random item could fetch a price of over 100,000 gold coins. However, even though that was the case, the moment Rocky stepped into the first store on the third floor, he was immediately attracted to an item. "Is this a demon tooth?" With a casual glance, Rocky noticed a tooth displayed in the showcase. The tooth was about a foot long, and its gray appearance was quite unremarkable compared to the other items in the showcase. But it caught Rocky's attention immediately. I'm not quite sure." Monty approached the showcase for a closer look, but still couldn't identify which demon the tooth belonged to after a long while. "Shopkeeper, what kind of demon tooth is this?" Seeing that even Monty couldn't recognize it, Rocky grew even more curious and decided to ask the store owner directly. "My lord, to be honest, we also don't know which demon this tooth comes from." When asked by Rocky, a hint of embarrassment appeared on the owner's face. "This tooth has been in our inventory for several years now, and the initial records are long gone, so I'm not entirely sure which demon it belonged to. But rest assured, there is absolutely no problem with the quality of this tooth, and its size is perfect for crafting into a dagger. Even if used to make a mana weapon, it would be much superior to ordinary materials. How much for this tooth? After the owner finished speaking, Rocky immediately inquired. 1,200 gold coins. It was clear the shopkeeper wanted to sell this unidentified demon tooth, so the quoted price wasn't too high. Rocky's eyes lit up upon hearing the price. It was acceptable to him. Although the tooth's origin was unknown, Rocky intended to buy it for experimentation, so he didn't need it to be of the highest grade. With that thought, he turned to look at Lilia. Go and call Aileen. Although the tooth wasn't very expensive, Rocky felt there might be room to negotiate the price, so he decided to have Aileen come over, as no one among them was better at bargaining than her. Soon after, Lilia returned with Aileen in tow. My lord, why are you spending money recklessly again? As soon as Lilia found her, Aileen confronted Rocky with a pout and an unhappy face. She didn't even give Rocky a chance to speak before she blurted out, Why bother buying such things, my lord? I've already made arrangements with the Continental Commerce Chamber. After this trade is completed, they will gift us 10 man-eating demon teeth. My lord, please go back. Don't cause me any more trouble here. Pouting, Aileen complained to Rocky, and as soon as she finished speaking, everyone present was taken aback. Eileen's words left everyone stunned, especially the store owner, who was even frightened by her statement. The Continental Commerce Chamber that Aileen mentioned is one of the most powerful chambers in the entire Sky City. What kind of background do these people have to be doing business with the Continental Commerce Chamber? NOVLB //JNN. And Aileen also said that the other party would gift 10 ogre teeth, which was even more unbelievable to the store owner. It's not that such a thing had never happened, but because even the purchase price of a man-eating demon's tooth would be around 2,000 gold coins. How big a deal had they discussed with the Continental Commerce Chamber to receive such valuable items as gifts? Due to the shock when the store owner looked at Rocky again, his expression had changed from before, clearly unable to figure out Rocky and his companions' backgrounds. It was no wonder that the store owner was frightened, because even Rocky was startled when he heard Eileen's words. He knew best what they were there to sell, which was nowhere near as exaggerated as Aileen had described. However, since Rocky had been with Aileen for quite a while, he quickly regained his composure and then coughed twice. Aileen, don't talk about me for now. Look at this tooth. I think it's pretty good. Nonsense. What good things could there be on the third floor of the exchange? During the conversation, they approached the counter. Aileen pursed her lips and examined the teeth in the counter. Then she looked at the owner. Boss, how much for this? 1,200 gold coins. It must be said, Eileen's series of actions after coming here genuinely shocked the store owner. So when she asked him like this, the store owner responded somewhat falteringly, looking very guilty. Tisich. Aileen glanced at the owner impatiently. This thing, my family likes it. Your fortune is selling it to us. 500 gold coins at most, otherwise I won't let them buy it. This. The store owner immediately showed a troubled expression. 500 gold coins was indeed too low a price. However, he didn't immediately refuse because, conversely, he really wanted to quickly sell the tooth Rocky was interested in. In fact, regarding this tooth, the owner hadn't told a single lie. The tooth had indeed been stored in their warehouse for many years, for some reason kept in a corner unnoticed, unrecognized, and under such circumstances, the owner also wanted to quickly sell it off to avoid being stuck with it. Moreover, since Aileen had been acting like money was no issue from start to finish, the owner didn't want to offend Rocky and the others. So, after a moment's hesitation, he finally bit the bullet and sold the unidentified demon tooth to Rocky. Just like that, with a little cunning, Aileen managed to slash the price of the demon tooth by more than half and successfully purchased the unknown tooth. Actually, Rocky and the others were well aware that everything Aileen had said earlier was just to scare the store owner. It was all about waving the big flag to beef up their appearance. And logically speaking, the store owner should not have been frightened by such tricks, but since Rocky was indeed a city lord, he didn't seem like an ordinary person. Furthermore, Eileen's bluff was big enough, involving things like the Continental Commerce Chamber and the teeth of man-eating demons, making the store owner not even dare to doubt. Thus, he was duped. Aileen, how did it go? Did you find a buyer? After leaving the store and securely storing the demon's tooth, Rocky looked at Aileen, eager to know how her negotiations regarding the Grey Rock stone went. My lord, don't worry. These things take time. I've already roughly talked with a few chambers of commerce and want to ask a few more, so we might not finish the discussions today. Eileen's idea was clearly right, so Rocky thought for a moment before saying, if that's the case, let's split up. You keep looking for suitable buyers here, no rush, and I'll go check out the leather and technicians. That works. Nodding. Aileen then split up from Rocky and continued to look for chambers of commerce to discuss the Grey Rock Stone affair. As Rocky had stated, he quickly left the hunting exchange with Lilia and Monty. His visit to Eternal City was not just to sell Grey Rock Stone. There were many matters Rocky needed to handle, among which the most important were those he had just mentioned, buying leather and hiring technicians. Previously, he had prepared to reform the economy of Thunderhawk City, for which he and Aileen had discussed for several days and successfully formulated a detailed plan, termed Thunderhawk City's 2 Economic Reform Plan, or the Dual Reform Plan for short. The so-called dual reform referred to both economic model and economic focus, gradually transitioning Thunderhawk City from a planned economy to a free market economy and shifting the economic focus from low-margin textiles to higher-cost, but likewise highly profitable, leather manufacturing. The decision to choose leather manufacturing was a mutual decision between Rocky and Aileen after careful consideration. Because leather production shared some similarities with textiles, it would be easier for the residents of Thunderhawk City to adapt. Furthermore, the leather industry had good market prospects, covering everything from military to daily uses, which suited a small city like Thunderhawk with a low population that needed an industry that, despite low output, didn't worry about sales and profits. To ensure success, Rocky was considering using the opportunity of his visit to Eternal City to hire a few technicians to teach in Thunderhawk City, so the local residents could learn leather manufacturing techniques and then gradually develop this industry in the city. So after splitting up with Aileen, he followed Monty's lead towards the Technician Guild, ready to hire some technicians. However, they hadn't reached the Technician Guild when another guild caught Rocky's attention. Monty, what is this mercenary guild? Stopping in his tracks, Rocky pointed at a building not far away and asked, My lord, that is where various sky cities congregate to distribute missions. Monty glanced at the building Rocky mentioned and provided an answer. There's actually a place like this? Let's check it out. Monty's explanation immediately piqued Rocky's interest, and without another word, he headed straight for the mercenary guild. However, just as he had taken a few steps, Lilia stopped him. Rocky, what are you planning to do now? Stopping Rocky, Lilia looked at him disapprovingly, as if she could see right through him. I'm just going to take a look. I promise not to do anything rash. With a chuckle to Lilia, Rocky said this, but his feet didn't stop, heading directly towards the mercenary guild. Full of curiosity about the mercenary guild he had chanced upon, Rocky had disregarded Lilia's protests and walked straight into the guild. Unlike the previous exchange he visited, the mercenary guild was housed within a 2-story building, yet its scale was much more grand, giving an immediate impression of magnificence. Moreover, it was bustling with people coming and going in large numbers. As soon as Rocky entered the mercenary guild, he found it extraordinarily lively. The people here far outnumbered those at the exchange, and they varied widely in appearance. For instance, just as Rocky walked through the door, he brushed past an elf whose beauty rivaled that of women, and then, after just a few steps, bumped into a dwarf who reached only up to his waist. Goodness, the variety of races gathered here is enormous. Seeing so many different races for the first time, Rocky was clearly unaccustomed to it, and when he looked past the crowd into the main hall, he immediately noticed a mana board similar to the one in the exchange. There was also a notice board in the hall of the Mercenary Guild, even bigger than the one in the exchange, constantly scrolling with various kinds of information. Times Sky City offers a high-priced hiring of a mercenary group to help defend the mine, requiring a group size of over 500 members, with an average strength not below the 4th level, offering a commission of 30,000 gold coins per month. Times Chamber of Commerce offers a high-priced hiring of void magic warriors to escort merchant ships, seeking 30 individuals, paying 2,000 gold coins daily per person. Times Sky City offers a high-priced employment for a powerful mercenary group to collaborate in wiping out demons, requiring a group size of over 300 to coordinate with the Void Magic Squad, price negotiable. Beneath the notice board, Rocky looked intently at the rolling information and found that the content matched what Monty had described, all being commissions issued by Chambers of Commerce in Sky City, predominantly for combat missions. To be honest, it was the first time he had heard of such activities, so he couldn't help asking Monty, why does Sky City publish commissions to hire mercenary groups for combat? Well, Monty looked at Rocky, opened his mouth, and after a long pause finally said, "My lord, not every Sky City has strong capabilities, so the weaker ones, especially when they face troubles related to combat, typically post missions here to hire others to resolve their issues. And even some fairly powerful Sky Cities sometimes post tasks here, though these tend to be more dangerous. That's because the city lords don't want their own people to die." "Oh, I see." Monty's explanation made Rocky immediately understand. Then his eyes lit up and he asked, "To accept tasks here, do we have to form a mercenary group?" "Rocky, what are you planning?" Before Monty could reply to Rocky's question, Lilia, who was beside them, spoke angrily as she had already guessed what Rocky was thinking. I'm just asking, getting to know the situation doesn't pose any danger, right?" With a sly smile towards Lilia, Rocky turned back to Monty, awaiting his answer. "Actually, it's not necessary. For posting a task, one just needs to sign up, and it's similar for accepting tasks. As long as you meet the employer's requirements, the guild handles everything else. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a mercenary group." "So, what types of tasks are generally available here?" "Usually, they are protection-related, but they almost always involve combat, and 9 times out of 10 it's combating demons. That's why there are very few tasks for individuals here." With Monty's explanation, a grin spread across Rocky's face because for him, the Mercenary Guild was obviously a perfect place to make a fortune. Thunderhawk City was about to undergo a reform, which undoubtedly needed substantial investments for smooth progression. So now more than ever, Rocky needed a lot of money, a great deal of it. But the finances alone from Thunderhawk City were far from sufficient to cover these reform costs. Thus, Rocky had to think of other methods. Originally, his plan was to immediately go hunting a few demons to sell their parts for money to support the reform after he left. But now it seemed that the various tasks offered by the Mercenary Guild were clearly a better option, with commissions easily reaching tens or even several tens of thousands of gold coins. As the city lord of Thunderhawk City, Rocky had not only a set of void magic armor, but also 200 guards and 10 military floating ships under his command. Such a setup wouldn't count for much in Sky City, but in the mercenary world, it definitely reached the scale of a mercenary group and was sufficient to meet the requirements of many tasks. So after thinking it over carefully, Rocky felt this idea was very feasible. And then he asked, n/o/vel/b/c//c//om. "Monty, does the Mercenary Guild have any communication facilities that would allow me to check for tasks anytime, anywhere?" "Of course there are." Nodding, Monty said, "The Mercenary Guild has a task receiver that uses mana for transmission. It can check task information anytime and anywhere, and can also contact the guild to hand over tasks. Very convenient." "Monty!" As Monty was explaining in detail to Rocky, Lilia on the side became unhappy, glaring at Monty fiercely, scaring the large beast man into immediately shutting up, and then Lilia glared at Rocky with the same ferocity. Lilia knew Rocky too well. She knew from the start what little schemes he was plotting. Unlike Rocky, she had heard about the Mercenary Guild long ago, and was well aware that although the tasks offered here seemed to have high commissions, they were also extremely dangerous, and in some respects, even more dangerous than hunting demons. So naturally, Lilia didn't want Rocky to stay here any longer, because once Rocky understood the situation here, who knows what absurd and dangerous ideas would come out of his head. I'm just asking casually. However, facing Lilia's obstacle, Rocky was as usual, acting spoilt while looking at Monty. "Monty, do you think the Guard Corps of Thunderhawk City along with the 10 floating ships in the city, have the capability to undertake the tasks here? The question from Rocky somewhat bewildered Monty. Despite Lilia's repeated interruptions, Monty really hadn't expected Rocky to aim for these tasks, considering he was a city lord. Was it really necessary to partake in such dangerous activities? Moreover, considering the strength of Thunderhawk City, Monty's face showed a troubled expression. No worries, you can say anything. Seeing the troubled look on Monty's face, Rocky waved his hand, encouraging him to speak frankly. Seeing his persistence, the candid Monty thought for a moment before finally saying, "Sir, the 10 floating ships of Thunderhawk City are definitely a major force, which the vast majority of mercenary groups simply cannot compare with, and the strength of the city lord and Miss Lilia naturally goes without saying. However, the guard corps in the city, they really aren't suited for combat." Shaking his head, Monty finally spoke the truth. In his eyes, the guard corps of Thunderhawk City was merely for show, completely lacking combat capability. It's almost as I thought. Having heard his words, Rocky was not at all angered, but instead nodded in agreement, and then further asked, "Monty, if you were to train the guard corps, how long do you think it would take for the guard corps to become capable of actual combat?" After glancing at Monty, Rocky asked, "If you were to train the guard corps of Thunderhawk City, how long do you think it would take before the guard corps is capable of actual combat?" "My lord, I..." Caught off guard by the sudden question, Monty was at a loss for words and simply stood there stupefied. However, Rocky did not press him and soon looked around before walking over to the service counter in the hall to purchase a task receiver. The Mercenary Guild's task receiver was indeed a very convenient gadget. Not only could it check task information anytime and anywhere, but it also allowed for constant contact with the guild to complete the handover of tasks. The only issue was that it was not cheap. A palm-sized receiver cost a whopping 500 gold coins, which really made Rocky wince. But despite the pain, Rocky still bought one, believing that the investment of 500 gold coins would definitely bring him a return several times over. After that, he left with Lilia and Monty and finally made their way to the Technician Guild. There was not much to say about the journey to the Technician Guild. Once there, Rocky easily found 2 technicians willing to accompany him to Thunderhawk City. After negotiating the commission and signing a contract under the guild's notarization, the matter was settled. But that wasn't all. After leaving the Technician Guild, he hurriedly went to the largest trade market in Eternal City and ordered 500 pieces of leather there. These leathers were mainly for the residents to use in learning skills. The demand was not very high, and the cost was not too steep, so Rocky directly negotiated a deal with the seller and didn't bother Aileen. Only after attending to all of this did Rocky finally end his day's itinerary and return to the hotel. However, when he returned to the hotel, Aileen had already come back earlier and brought back some good news. The trade for Greyrock Stone was complete. "It's already done? So soon?" Rocky looked at Aileen in surprise, hardly believing it. He had thought that such things would take several days to finalize. "We were quite lucky this time." Seeing the skeptical expression on Rocky's face, Aileen went on to explain, "I didn't expect it to be concluded so quickly either, but it turns out that a newly established small chamber of commerce was in urgent need of a batch of Greyrock Stone, so the deal was made." "Then, what price did they offer?" More than which chamber of commerce had bought the Greyrock Stone, Rocky cared about how much money it was sold for, as this sum was too important to him. 19 gold coins per kilogram, 900 kilograms of Greyrock Stone. The total transaction price is 17,000 gold coins, and they also promised to gift a piece of blue rat demon skin. "We can complete the handover tomorrow." With a slight smile towards Rocky, Aileen couldn't hide her pride as she announced the outcome. And when Rocky and the others heard this result, they were all stunned, because this outcome was far beyond their expectations. Unexpectedly good. Before coming here, Rocky and Aileen had already made an estimate of the Greyrock Stone trade. Based on the market information that Aileen had at the time, they believed that the Greyrock Stone could be sold for at least 10,000 gold coins. As long as they hit this target, the money from selling grain in Thunderhawk City would be sufficient, and there might even be some surplus. So when Rocky found out that Aileen had actually sold the Greyrock Stone for 17,000 gold coins, and also got a piece of demon skin thrown into the deal, he He was so delighted he nearly jumped for joy. This price was way beyond his previous expectations. It was definitely an occasion for everyone to celebrate. Perhaps for other cities in the sky, the extra 7,000 gold coins might not seem like much, but for Thunderhawk City, not only was this amount not insignificant, it was also of paramount importance. With this money, Rocky could do so many things that he didn't even know how best to praise Aileen. So, he simply gave her a hug from the city lord, which was the best way he could think of to express his gratitude. The hug from the city lord caught Aileen off guard. When Rocky embraced her, she froze like ice, and even after Rocky let go, she hadn't thawed out. Fantastic, with this money, I can replace all the equipment for the guard corps. Rocky didn't notice Eileen's reaction and began to excitedly pace around the room, muttering something under his breath. It wasn't until then that Aileen barely snapped back to reality and stared blankly at Rocky for a while before speaking. "My lord, it's best to save and be sparing with this extra money." Seeing that Rocky had already started to plan how to use the money, Aileen felt the need to remind him. Although the Grey Rock Stone trade had exceeded their expectations, yielding a considerable windfall profit, Aileen had to remind Rocky that with Thunderhawk City's current situation, it was wiser not to spend money recklessly since they simply did not have the capital to squander. Such worries were not without merit. Rocky naturally knew this too, but in his opinion, gold coins stored in the warehouse would not breed smaller gold coins. On the contrary, sometimes spending all the money could actually lead to making even more money. Take the guard corps that he just mentioned, for example. After one visit to the mercenary guild, Rocky was considering becoming a mercenary, not meaning that he planned to abandon his role as city lord to become a mercenary, but rather he wanted to complete the tasks assigned by the mercenary guild. To Rocky, the tasks posted by the mercenary guild were undoubtedly a good way to earn money, and a substantial amount at that. Those tasks typically offered commissions in the tens of thousands of gold coins, which was not a small sum and would be of great help to Thunderhawk City. However, the tasks from the mercenary guild could not be done alone. They required a squad that met the task requirements. So, once he knew that the income from Grey Rock Stone far exceeded his expectations, he immediately thought of buying a batch of equipment for the guard corps. With new equipment, plus proper training, Thunderhawk City's guard corps would be like turning from matchlocks to cannons, ready to be truly useful. This is great. Truly great. I need to think about how to use this money. The excited Rocky paced around the room while muttering to himself, pondering in his mind about the best way to utilize the money Aileen had earned. N/O/vel/B//and.C////OM. He looked just like a child. Lilia, who had seen his antics multiple times, was unsurprised, but Aileen and Monty, who had never seen him like this, were both dumbfounded. They had never imagined that their city lord could act in such a way. And so, everyone's first day in Eternal City passed by. On this day, Rocky and others accomplished many things, but equally, there were many more tasks awaiting them, no matter if it was in Eternal City or Thunderhawk City. Therefore, on the second day, Rocky and Aileen continued on their separate tasks. Aileen went off to find the Chamber of Commerce to negotiate a grain trade deal, and after an excited night of planning, Rocky decided to take Lilia and Monty with him to purchase a batch of new equipment. The sky was far from peaceful now. War erupted at every moment, either against demons on the land or in major battles between the cities and the sky. In any case, the warfare never ceased. Under such circumstances, trade related to warfare naturally flourished, and as a trade city, Eternal City was never short of transactions related to war. It was even the largest weapon market in the entire sky. So when Monty brought Rocky to the weapon market of Eternal City, Rocky was immediately captivated by the dazzling array of weapons before him. The weapon market in Eternal City wasn't some small fair composed of roadside stalls. The market scale was immense, stretching across more than a dozen streets, a giant marketplace with several hundred shops ranging from simple soldiers' weapons and armor to floating warships, from cheap whetstones to the latest models of void magic armor. Everything was available. Upon arriving here, Rocky had turned into a big kid, excited beyond measure by the countless toys before him, and almost immediately dived eagerly into a shop. Hello, welcome. N/O/V/B/C//C//OM. As he walked into a shop with Lilia and Monty, a young and pretty female shop assistant greeted him with a smile as soon as he entered. What would you like to buy? Hello. Rocky nodded at the shop assistant and looked around the shop, noticing that it was a reasonably sized weapons store with various weapons and armor hanging on the walls, and the same was true for the counters. Furthermore, all the weapons did not look ordinary at all. Rocky then began to browse through the shop, and the shop assistant followed him closely, offering just the right amount of information whenever Rocky stopped or showed interest in a particular weapon. Sir, this backstab sword is forged from fine steel, coming from King Ding Mountain City, exceptionally sharp and can easily pierce through regular armor. This is a standard military shield, with a large defensive area and moderate weight, extremely agile to use. This is a set of heavy armor with very strong defensive power, even capable of withstanding an attack from a blue rat demon head-on. When Rocky paused and his eyes fell on an entire set of armor, the shop assistant beside him hurriedly introduced it. The shop assistant presented everything well, but Rocky wasn't really interested in these items, only slightly curious as he had not seen them before. So, he soon turned back to look at the shop assistant. Do you have mana weapons here? The reason Rocky had come to the weapon market this time was to buy equipment, and not just one or two pieces, but a large amount of gear because his goal was to arm the guard corps of Thunderhawk City. However, what he wanted to buy wasn't ordinary equipment, but mana equipment. Yes, we do. As soon as she heard his question, the shop assistant's face lit up with a radiant smile. It was well known that mana weapons were far more expensive than ordinary weapons, with profits several times higher naturally. So when the shop assistant heard that Rocky was interested in mana weapons, she became even more enthusiastic. She quickly led Rocky to a row of counters and then, pointing to them, she said, "Sir, these are the mana weapons you're looking for." Standing in front of the counter and looking down, Rocky saw that this row indeed contained all mana weapons. There were long swords and daggers embedded with magic stones and armor, and shields with magic stones in them. Although the quantity wasn't particularly extensive, the variety was quite complete. Let me take a look at that shield. After browsing for a while, he pointed at a shield, and the shop assistant immediately retrieved the indicated shield from the counter and handed it over to Rocky. This was an oval, steel shield with a slight curvature on its surface, as smooth as a mirror. It also featured a 3-star pattern, and when Rocky flipped it over to look at the inside, he saw that it was embedded with 3 micro-magic stones. There was no doubt that this was a magic energy shield of quite good quality, both in material and craftsmanship, and particularly because the shield had 3 micro-magic stones embedded into it. The defensive power of the shield sword, easily enough to withstand a head-on assault from a 4th-level warrior. Sir, this magic energy shield is crafted from fine steel and a small amount of mithril. The arc of the shield surface has been specially designed to effectively reduce the impact force when defending against attacks. Moreover, as a 3-star magic energy equipment, its magic energy value exceeds 150 points. The powerful mana ensures that it can easily withstand the heavy strikes of a 5th-level warrior. As Rocky carefully examined the magic energy shield in his hands, the female sales clerk thoroughly introduced the advantages of the shield to him. What she referred to as 3-star magic energy equipment actually meant that the shield was embedded with 3 magic stones, 1 magic stone representing 1 star. However, her description was clearly exaggerated. Although Rocky might not know much about the material and craftsmanship of the shield, his mastery of mana runes meant he understood magic energy values much more deeply than most people. In his view, the craftsmanship and material of the shield were indeed very good, but the magic energy value definitely did not reach 150 points. A micro-magic stone could only provide 40 points of mana, and 3 micro-magic stones made 120 points. While some special techniques, after processing, could increase this value, the shield in front of him did not feature such technology. Not only did the magic energy value of this shield not reaching 150 points, it didn't even reach 120 points. Without additional technical enhancement, it was impossible for 3 micro-magic stones to fully unleash their contained magic energy. According to Rocky's estimation, The magic energy value of this shield was at most around 100 points. It should be fine for defending against the attacks of a 4th-level warrior, but it definitely couldn't withstand the assault of a 5th-level warrior, let alone their heavy strikes. But he wasn't interested in quibbling with the female sales clerk. Instead, he followed up with the question, "How much is this shield?" "Sir, 800 gold coins." 800 gold coins. For Rocky, the price was undoubtedly too expensive. So he asked afterward, "Do you have something a little less expensive? Cheaper?" The sales clerk didn't look down on Rocky after hearing his request. Instead, she lowered her head and rummaged through the counter. She soon found another shield. "Sir, this shield is made from top-grade black iron. Although it's only a 1-star shield, it still has a magic energy value of 50 points, and the price is much lower, only 300 gold coins." While speaking, the sales clerk handed the shield she was holding to Rocky. But to her surprise, Rocky didn't even look at the shield and asked again, "Still too pricey. Do you have anything even cheaper?" "Even cheaper?" The sales clerk, holding the shield up in midair, was stunned. After a moment, she smiled somewhat awkwardly. "Sir, if you're looking for something cheaper, I'm afraid we only have ordinary shields. No, I want magic energy equipment, but it doesn't need to be embedded with micro-magic stones. Even equipment with even smaller stones would do. I'm sorry, we don't sell that kind of equipment." When Rocky said this, the previously friendly sales clerk instantly changed her expression. She frowned at Rocky and then said irritably, "Sir, this is a legitimate weapon shop. We don't sell the kind of equipment you're talking about." After saying that, the sales clerk no longer paid any attention to Rocky. She rolled her eyes at him and returned to her position behind the counter. What was going on? The sudden change in the sales clerk's demeanor caught Rocky completely off guard, and he was puzzled by what had just happened. Had he said something wrong? In the frustrated gaze of the female clerk, Rocky helplessly left the shop, still puzzled about the situation even after he had stepped outside. n/o/vel/b/gen.c//om. Had he said something wrong just now? Shaking his head in confusion, he didn't dwell on it much and directly headed for the second shop. Upon entering the second shop, Rocky did the same as before, inquiring about the prices of magical equipment, and once again asked if there was any cheapest magical equipment available. The cheaper, the better, even if it wasn't inlaid with a micro-magic stone instead of a small magic stone. As soon as he made this request, the clerk hurriedly shook his head. While he wasn't as disdainful as the previous female clerk, he nevertheless began to ignore Rocky soon after. What Rocky didn't know was that those who worked in weapon shops were experts, and they all knew one basic fact, that the minimum standard for mana equipment was to have one small magic stone inlaid. Only equipment with at least one small magic stone could be called mana equipment, and anything below this standard could not be considered as such. The request Rocky had made clearly fell below this minimum standard, hence he naturally came back empty-handed. Yet, having hit a wall twice in a row, Rocky was all the more persistent, asking at each shop he visited just as he had at the first two. Thus, he went through 7 or 8 shops in a row without any intention of stopping. Perseverance paid off, as after visiting more than a dozen shops and traversing several streets, he finally found what he was looking for in a secluded little store. "Yes, sir, we have what you were looking for right here. Enjoy new tales from." As soon as the thin-faced shopkeeper, with a monkey-like expression, heard Rocky's request, he immediately showed a smile. "Sir, please give me a moment right here." After saying that, the shopkeeper turned and went into the back room of the shop, and not long after, he came out holding a round shield. Holding the round shield close to Rocky, the shopkeeper said with a beaming smile, "Sir, this is the magic energy equipment you wanted. It's impossible to tell anything from its workmanship or material. It looks just like normal magic energy equipment, and moreover..." Meanwhile, the shopkeeper turned the shield over, pointing at the magic stone inlaid on the back. "And look, this magic stone can only provide the mana of a micro-magic stone, but its appearance and size are exactly like that of a small magic stone, absolutely indistinguishable from the real thing." After saying this, the shopkeeper laughed heartily at Rocky, with an expression that said, "You know what I mean." From the shopkeeper's various behaviors, it was clear that he mistook Rocky for a swindler who dealt in fake magic energy equipment. Indeed, The magic energy shield he was introducing to Rocky was a counterfeit. This shield, although inlaid with a magic stone, only had a micro-magic stone, which could indeed provide mana, but the amount it provided was insufficient for battle, making it a genuinely fake piece of magic energy equipment. This was also the very reason that Rocky kept facing rejection in the previous shops, because to those clerks, his description of mana equipment was simply akin to seeking a fake. For legitimate weapon shops, selling poor-quality weapons and equipment was strictly forbidden since it directly affected the shop's reputation, even touching on the most fundamental ethical bottom line. What is the purpose of weapons and equipment? They are for battle. Therefore, if there's any issue with the quality of weapons and equipment, it could be a matter of life and death, and no weapon shop would dare to play tricks on this issue, as it could mean the end for the shop if something went wrong. However, there are always exceptions, for when the forest grows, all kinds of birds will fly into it. Knowing that selling substandard weapons and equipment was unethical, there were still some unscrupulous merchants who engaged in such business in the shadows, much like the shopkeeper now. Before this, Rocky certainly had no knowledge of these matters, but when he saw the expression on the boss's face as he faced him, he pretty much understood what was going on. Yet, after that, not only did he say nothing, but he also took the fake magic energy shield, looked it over, and then nodded his head in satisfaction, as though the shield was exactly to his liking. "Sir, may I have a word with you?" At that moment, as Rocky was nodding incessantly at the shield in his hand, Monty, who had followed him for a day, could no longer hold back and called him aside. "Sir, are you planning to buy equipment for the Guard Corps?" "Yes, what about it?" Rocky glanced at Monty with an unconscious look of surprise, as if Monty was asking something he already knew. Indeed, Monty was asking a question to which he already knew the answer, because, since Rocky had brought him to Eternal City, he had never treated Monty like an outsider and had not done anything without including him. So, Monty was indeed aware of Rocky's intentions. But it was precisely because he knew what Rocky intended to do that Monty asked the question. He meant to remind Rocky. Seeing that Rocky completely missed his point, Monty felt he had to elaborate. "Sir, are you planning to equip the Thunderhawk City Guard Corps with new gear and then lead them on mercenary guild missions?" "Exactly. Sir, if you really intend to do so, this kind of shield simply won't do. After all, the majority of the mercenary guild's missions involve facing demons," Monty said straightforwardly after looking Rocky in the eye. Although he had only been with Rocky for 2 days, Monty had already understood the city lord's financial situation. It wasn't wealthy, but that didn't make Monty think less of Rocky. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It made him respect Rocky even more. Monty had observed every action of Rocky since his arrival in Eternal City, noting that he didn't lead a life of debauchery like other city lords or nobles. Rocky certainly had the means to do so. Even though he wasn't rich, he could still come up with tens of thousands of gold coins, enough to enjoy several days in Eternal City. But Rocky didn't do that. He saved almost all of his money and never spent it frivolously. All his expenditures had clear purposes. And this series of actions had left a very good impression on Monty, even making him consider staying at Rocky's side. If he could follow a city lord like that, Monty felt it wouldn't be too bad. However, Rocky's actions today greatly disappointed Monty. Monty knew Rocky was planning to buy equipment for the Guard Corps, and that Rocky wasn't rich. But even so, one should not purchase such shoddily made fake magic energy shields for one's own guards, should they? This behavior had surpassed the limit of what Monty could tolerate. If Rocky was planning to take on mercenary guild tasks, it meant that he would be leading his guards into land combat, in a battle with demons on land. And once the battle ensued, could one even imagine what would become of the Thunderhawk City guards relying on these fake magic energy shields? If soldiers were sent into combat with demons wielding such fake shields, wasn't Rocky essentially making a joke out of his subordinates' lives? So, Monty could no longer hold back. He felt he must remind Rocky, because such behavior was no longer fitting of a person. Not even the coldest-hearted or most frugal city lord would do such a thing. "Sir, I suggest you not to buy this batch of equipment." Looking at Rocky, the towering beast man said most cautiously. However, despite his earnest persuasion, Rocky, although exasperated, still shook his head. "Monty, you should know I don't have much money." After saying this, He ignored Monty's reaction and directly turned to the shop owner. "Owner, give me 100 of these shields." And after saying this, he even asked, "Do you have more armor like this?" "Yes, yes." The sly smiling owner quickly nodded and, just like before, went to the back of the shop and brought out another set of armor. This armor, just like the previous shields, were counterfeit magical equipment. They looked no different from regular magic armor, but in actuality, they were embedded with micro-magic stones that had no effect whatsoever. This type of armor, as well as the prior shields, seemed like magical equipment, but were actually equivalent to ordinary equipment. However, these items had one advantage. They were cheap. 100 sets of armor and 100 shields together cost only 6,000 gold coins. And after some bargaining, Rocky actually spent only 5,000 gold coins to buy all 200 pieces. Without a doubt, this price was incredibly cheap, because if the same 5,000 gold coins were used to buy real magic energy equipment, even the lowest 1-star magic energy gear, he could only buy at most 20 pieces. That is to say, the price difference between the real and fake items was more than tenfold. It didn't take much time for Rocky to complete this transaction. He also arranged with the owner that early next morning, he would have all the equipment he purchased delivered to the skyship, where they would settle the payment. And throughout all this, Rocky did not try to avoid Monty, so his various actions were all seen by Monty, making Monty even more disappointed. Thus, after Rocky finished the transaction and left the shop, Monty, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up. "Sir, I'm heading back first." After saying this to Rocky, and even without waiting for Rocky's response, Monty turned and left right away. Clearly, though he didn't say much, his behavior spoke volumes. Monty obviously left filled with anger. And watching his receding figure, Lilia glanced at Rocky. "Aren't you going to explain to him?" Discover exclusive content at Explain What? Turning to Lilia, Rocky's expression was helpless. In front of everyone, should I tell him about the mana runes? After saying this, Rocky looked in the direction Monty had left, not worried, but rather nodding in satisfaction. He certainly knew that Monty was disappointed with him because of the recent incident, but he wasn't in a hurry because it was clearly a misunderstanding. Rocky hadn't gone to great lengths to purchase a batch of fake mana equipment because he truly wanted to save money at the expense of his guards' lives. Indeed, it wasn't Monty who cared the most about the Thunderhawk City Guard squad, but Rocky himself. That was the only armed force under his command, which was bound to play a significant role now and in the future. How could Rocky possibly joke about their lives? He would never engage in such self-destructive behavior. In fact, he had bought the counterfeit mana equipment precisely to increase the survival chances of the Thunderhawk City Guards in future battles. Because only with such fake mana equipment could the real mana runes function effectively. As he had said many times before, with the current strength of Rocky and Thunderhawk City, the mana runes could not be exposed carelessly. Hence, Rocky had to devise a way to maximize their effect without revealing them. That was the rationale behind the transaction just now. Although the mana equipment he had just purchased was fake and couldn't exert the power of genuine mana equipment, the problem would be solved if Rocky drew mana runes on this gear. Once runes were inscribed on these fake pieces of mana equipment, they would become authentic rune equipment. And why had Rocky specifically chosen to buy shields and armor? Among all the types of equipment, these two were the most expensive. If he had merely wanted to economize, he could have simply bought wrist guards or even helmets, which are far cheaper. Yet Rocky did not do so. He specifically chose armor and shields because more mana runes could be drawn on these two items. He estimated that at least 50 first-level runes could be applied to the armor and shields, enough to bring their defensive power to the level of 1-star magic energy gear. More importantly, this approach wouldn't allow the mana runes to be easily exposed. No one would suspect that these pieces of mana equipment were embedded only with micro-magic stones, while the actual source of mana was the runes. This solution was the best Rocky could conceive at this stage. It would not expose the top-tier technology of the mana runes, while subtly allowing the mana runes to unleash their effects. Indeed, it was a strategy that killed two birds with one stone. Unfortunately, the only person who understood his intentions was Lilia. Others, such as Monty, would completely misunderstand him. However, Rocky wasn't worried about Monty's misunderstanding. Instead, he felt that this incident had allowed him to understand Monty better. Although he had always wanted to recruit Monty to his side, the two had known each other for such a short time that Rocky had always been apprehensive about Monty's character. He wasn't recruiting Monty just to work under him. He wanted to build his own team. Monty's behavior today, however, gave Rocky a deeper understanding of him. Moreover, the straightforward nature displayed by the Beast Men greatly appealed to Rocky. So, although Monty had left in a huff, this reaction was instead seen as a validation by Rocky. He also believed that once he explained everything, the Beast Man would surely understand him. N/O/vel/b//jen.c//om. Under these circumstances, he didn't chase after Monty. Instead, he soon went on a leisurely walk through the weapon market with Lilia, and they didn't return to their hotel until evening. The day had not only resulted in a successful deal, but also exposed him to much of the world. The weapon market in Eternal City was extremely vast and offered an array of equipment, including floating warships and void magic armor. After Monty left, Rocky and Lilia focused their attention on the void magic armor and skyships. They visited several large stores in succession, not returning until their legs were weak. This round of exploration made Rocky feel that he was finally on track with the world, for he had not realized until he saw for himself. Up to now, he had been a frog at the bottom of a well. The age had left Thunderhawk City far, far behind. Although demons had occupied the land for 100 years, people did not stop their strides after fleeing to the sky. In fact, during these 100 years, the entire world had developed and progressed, and the steps were quite significant. However, the sky was too vast and boundless, and communication between the scattered sky cities was extremely poor. Coupled with the imbalance in human resources, material resources, financial resources, etc., the development of each sky city was very uneven. Strong sky cities, such as the top 10 divine cities of monster-level magnitude, had long surpassed the top cities of the land era in splendor, reaching new heights that the predecessors could never have imagined. Beyond the top 10 divine cities, some large sky cities had also developed very rapidly. These large sky cities might not be comparable to the top 10 divine cities, but their scale had surpassed cities from the land era. As for the weaker sky cities, such as some large sky cities and the vast majority of medium-sized sky cities, the scale of the cities had at least returned to the level of the land era. And in all aspects, there was no difference from the cities of the land era. The weakest batch of cities in the sky were the small-sized ones like Thunderhawk City. No matter from which angle, these small sky cities fell behind other cities by more than an entire era. Your next chapter is on. Rocky was previously unaware of this because he had been staying in Thunderhawk City since crossing over. Although he knew Thunderhawk City was weak, he did not understand to what extent and what level it held in the entire sky, due to a lack of horizontal comparison. However, after staying in Eternal City for 2 days, especially after browsing through the weapon market, Rocky realized just how backward Thunderhawk City was. Why did he suddenly understand? Because in any world, weapons are a ruler that can measure everyone's strength and weakness. Take a simple example. In Thunderhawk City, Rocky was already the strongest person. After all, he was the only one who possessed a void magic armor, and the whole city only had one set of void magic armor. But in Eternal City, even a mere air patrol officer was equipped with void magic armor. The strength and weakness of the two cities were immediately apparent through this mere fact. The ability to equip a humble patrol officer with void magic armor amply illustrated the economic prowess of Eternal City and proved the military might of Eternal City. Economic and military strength combined represented the significant role of Eternal City among all sky cities. This was all that could be measured with the ruler of weapons. So, after touring the weapon market, particularly after seeing the latest model of void magic armor, Rocky essentially knew where Thunderhawk City ranked in the current world, and he also gained a more comprehensive understanding of the void magic armor. Rocky possessed a set of void magic armor, but his armor was too outdated. After a tour in the weapon market, he realized that his void magic armor belonged to the 1st generation, while the latest was already the 5th generation. This gap gave Rocky quite a shock. So for the next several days, instead of continuing to wander idly, he buried himself in the library of Eternal City. It must be said that after coming to Eternal City, Rocky's insights soared dramatically, and his vision and goals for the future became gradually clearer. Under these circumstances, merely using mana runes to enhance weapons and equipment was no longer enough for him. He planned to use mana runes in more areas and maximize the value of runes. This kind of idea naturally required a vast amount of knowledge to realize. So for the next several days, Rocky would leave early and return late, spending all his time in the library. Just like that, time flew by for 3 days. During this period, Lilia had already found a chamber of commerce willing to trade with Thunderhawk City, and everything was settled. They could have left already, but they ended up staying in Eternal City entirely because of Rocky. Since he started frequenting the library, Rocky became unstoppable, completely drowning in the sea of knowledge, which led to them lingering many days in Eternal City. n/o/vel/b/jen.c//om. Today would be Rocky's last visit to the library, as Aileen had given him an ultimatum. Their mere food and lodging expenses in Eternal City had already exceeded 500 gold coins, and with the departure tax, their expenditure had long surpassed 1,000. This cost greatly exceeded Eileen's prior estimate, and they had to leave. Under these circumstances, Rocky had to hurry and find all the books he needed in the library, then buy them all in one go, planning to study them slowly after returning to Thunderhawk City. This book will be needed too. After flipping through a few pages of a book titled Principles of Magic Cannon Construction, Rocky handed it over to Lilia, intending to buy it later. But just at that moment, a young woman happened to pass by him. Rocky did not think much of it. His attention was on the book, but the woman turned her head to look at him subsequently. After looking at him for a while, she couldn't help but speak. "Rocky, is that you?" Hearing someone calling him, Rocky stopped and turned around to look, just in time to see the woman looking back at him. Regarding the young woman who had called out his name, Rocky appeared quite puzzled. "Are you calling me?" He pointed to himself and asked uncertainly, as he did not recognize the other party at all. "Rocky, don't you recognize me?" At this moment, the young woman had walked up to him, looking at him with an expression that was hard to describe. "Do I know you?" The woman's words prompted Rocky to take a closer look. He noticed she was very beautiful and dressed meticulously, giving off an air of similarity to Aileen, evidently someone of noble background. But he was certain he did not know this person. Seeing Rocky failing to recognize her for quite some time, the woman's expression became even more peculiar. But she eventually said, "Rocky, I'm Cyril. We met a year ago in Barren City." Barren City. Upon hearing this name, Rocky suddenly felt as though he remembered something. Then it suddenly dawned on him. His father's family was the Barren family, and the Sky City where this family resided was called Barren City. With this realization, Rocky immediately remembered who the woman before him was, and he exclaimed in astonishment, "Cousin?" His eyes gradually widened, and Rocky couldn't help but cry out loud. He finally remembered who this woman named Cyril was. She was his cousin. So-called cousins naturally referred to relatives of his father's generation, which is to say, Cyril was from the Barren family. Rocky's father came from the Barren family, and after his father's death, the people from this family took away everything that Rocky had inherited, even including a medium-sized Sky City with a population of 30,000. This incident, whether for Rocky before he traveled through time or the current Rocky, was etched deeply into his bones. Initially, Rocky thought he would never have anything to do with the Barren family in this lifetime because he was no longer who he used to be, yet he hadn't expected to encounter someone from the Barren family today. This truly surprised him. However, after a brief moment of surprise, he calmed his emotions, neither displaying great anger nor the joy of seeing a relative. He simply nodded to Cyril as if he was looking at a stranger, and then he turned and walked away. As for the various events before Rocky traveled through time, he actually didn't care much. Similarly, he had no fondness for the Barren family. Under such circumstances, he didn't want anything to do with the family, including any of its members. As for his cousin Cyril, he had even less of an impression. Perhaps it was true that they had met once, as she said, But due to his dislike and deliberate distance from the Merent family, Rocky had no intention of clinging to kinship. Wait! Watching Rocky turn to leave with an expressionless face, Cyril instinctively wanted to call out to him, but stopped herself at the last moment. The words that had reached her lips remained unspoken, and in the end, she could only sigh as she watched Rocky's retreating figure. Cyril was not surprised by Rocky's reaction, although it left her feeling helpless, because she knew all too well what the family had done to Rocky. After all, once Rocky's father had passed away, the family took everything he was supposed to inherit and /o//b//c//om. Obviously, such an action could not possibly gain Rocky's favor. It was even more unfair to him, yet there was nothing that could be done about it. The Merent family was a powerful and immense family with a long history, controlling over 10 sky cities and holding a prestigious reputation throughout the heavens. In such a gigantic family, intense internal struggles were inevitable, and it was for this reason that Rocky's father had left the family. But how could one cleanly break away from such a massive family? That's why after his death, the family took everything from Rocky, a result also caused by the family struggles. Cyril, who was already involved in the management of the family, was well aware of these matters. She had even been part of the decision to take away everything Rocky had inherited. That's why her expression was so strange after she recognized Rocky. She knew that Rocky lived in Thunderhawk City, and while she had never been there herself, one could imagine the conditions of a city that the family had intended to give up. So when Cyril recognized Rocky, she felt somewhat guilty. "Sister, what's wrong with you?" Find adventures at. Just as Cyril was staring at Rocky's disappearing figure in a daze, a young man about her age came over. While speaking, he glanced in the direction where Rocky had disappeared, catching sight of Rocky's fading figure. "Sister, who is that person?" "He's your cousin, Rocky." Coming back to his senses, Cyril let out a sigh. "Rocky!" Hearing this name, the young man thought for a moment before an expression of realization dawned on his face. "Oh, I remember now." While speaking, the young man looked in the direction Rocky had left. "Sis, is he the one who had his inheritance taken away by the family? I heard this guy is pretty spineless. When the family was taking away his sky city, he didn't even dare say a word. Don't talk nonsense. He's your cousin." Turning her head to glare at her little brother, Cyril was quite displeased. But the young man just shrugged, showing a carefree expression. "Teach. I don't want a cousin who's such a loser." After saying that, something suddenly occurred to the young man, and he then said, "Sis, didn't the family give Thunderhawk City to this guy?" "Yes, what about it? I think I overheard Father mentioning Thunderhawk City the other day that, what's his name? Barren Voline, right? Barren Voline recently secured a large mine for the family. Although it wasn't some grand achievement, Father and the others could not reward him, so it seemed they were also planning to grant Thunderhawk City to Barren Voline." "What?" Upon hearing this, Cyril immediately looked at her brother, and her complexion changed on the spot. Rocky was unaware of what had transpired with Cyril after he left the library, because although he recognized her, and it brought up some unpleasant memories, he didn't take it to heart. In fact, as soon as he left the library, he had left Cyril and all matters related to the Merent family behind. Upon returning to the hotel, everyone started to pack up, and then, with a full harvest, they finally left Eternal City. For Rocky and his group, the trip to Eternal City was highly rewarding. Not only did they sell Greyrock Stone at a high price, but they also found a new chamber of commerce to partner with, hired a technician, and even purchased new equipment for the Guard Corps. They hadn't just accomplished all the goals set before they left, but had exceeded them. With this in mind, Rocky was in a very good mood on the way back to Thunderhawk City, completely unaffected by everything that had happened in the library. In fact, once he got back to Thunderhawk City, he slept soundly to adjust his mental state, after which he was ready to make big moves. Because after returning from Eternal City, Rocky had already prepared everything he needed. Next, he would carry out economic reforms in Thunderhawk City. This was a significant event both for him and for Thunderhawk City. Rocky had even invited 2 technicians from Eternal City for this purpose, and had bought a batch of leather to ensure the smooth progress of the economic reforms in Thunderhawk City. However, Before the reforms in Thunderhawk City had officially begun the next day, a new piece of news arrived first. The Azure Commerce Guild had sent someone at this time to inquire when Thunderhawk City would purchase grain and how much they would buy. Upon learning of this, Rocky was momentarily stunned, and then a sly smile spread across his face. Rocky really hadn't expected that just after his return to Thunderhawk City, he would receive a message from the Azure Commerce Guild, especially one inquiring about how much food he wanted to buy. This couldn't help but amuse Rocky a bit. It seemed the Azure Commerce Guild still had no awareness. After that last unpleasant trade, did they really think they had Thunderhawk City under their thumb? In reality, Thunderhawk City no longer needed to conduct any trade with the Azure Commerce Guild, because Aileen had already negotiated a deal with another chamber in Eternal City long before. This chamber was called the Ruby Chamber of Commerce, a newly established business with its headquarters in Eternal City. Although smaller in scale compared to the Azure Commerce Guild, precisely because of this, they wouldn't bully their clients. Also, being newly established, the Ruby Chamber of Commerce also urgently needed a steady, major client like Thunderhawk City. In the eyes of the Azure Commerce Guild, Thunderhawk was just a minor client, but to the Ruby Chamber of Commerce, Thunderhawk could be considered a major client. Therefore, when Aileen approached them, they agreed to her terms right away, not only agreeing to supply the necessary food and yarn steadily, but also at a much more favorable price than the Azure Commerce Guild. With this in place, there was absolutely no need for Thunderhawk City to cooperate with the Azure Commerce Guild anymore. However, Rocky did not do so. Aileen, he said, tell the people from the Azure Commerce Guild that we need the food supply as per the previous year's amounts, and the sooner the better. As for the price, we'll discuss it later. Just get the food here quickly. My lord, what did you say? Blinking at Rocky, Aileen doubted if she had heard correctly. My lord, we have already settled with the Ruby Chamber of Commerce. They will deliver this year's food supply in 3 days, and I have already paid the deposit. Although Thunderhawk City had returned to the vicinity of Eternal City, the city did not immediately leave, the reason being that in a few days, the Ruby Chamber of Commerce would be delivering the food. Therefore, Aileen couldn't understand why Rocky still wanted the Azure Commerce Guild to transport food. I know, I just want to see what the Azure Commerce Guild's food supply looks like this year. With a sly grin, Rocky told her not to ask too much and just do as he said. Aileen, being exceedingly clever, immediately understood what Rocky was up to and subsequently shook her head helplessly, the words childish popping into her mind. Although in her thoughts, she found Rocky's approach quite childish, her heart was brimming with glee because she too was eager to see the expression on Jiaxi's face, the old pervert who tried to take advantage of them, when he arrived in Thunderhawk City laden with food. Having discussed the matter with the Azure Commerce Guild, Aileen didn't leave right away, because what she had to talk about next was more serious. My lord, the notice for the training class has been posted. Oh, how has the response been? Upon hearing this from Aileen, Rocky immediately asked. Previously, he had already hired 2 technicians from the Technician Guild, and he had them start teaching in Thunderhawk City. He had introduced this training class for the residents to learn leather-making skills, which is what Aileen was referring to. Early this morning, Rocky had people post notices throughout the urban areas of Thunderhawk City, hoping the residents would eagerly sign up to learn new skills, and all courses were free of charge. Yet faced with his eager expectations, Aileen indeed looked at him helplessly and then shook her head. My lord, the resident's response isn't too enthusiastic. Experienced new tales on. Looking at Rocky, Aileen, though reluctant to dampen his enthusiasm, still had to tell the truth, because the reality was as she said. The response to the notice posted by the city lord's mansion was lukewarm, and no one had signed up all morning. This was actually to be expected, as the residents of Thunderhawk City had long been accustomed to a lifestyle of men plowing fields and women weaving at home, and no one thought there was anything wrong with this way of living, so no one was willing to attend any training classes. Sir, I think you should just issue an order directly, commanding the town's residents to attend the training classes, as this would be more effective, he said. Looking at Rocky, Aileen expressed her thoughts. Setting up training classes was not a problem. After all, leather manufacturing was a new technology for Thunderhawk City, and the residents indeed needed to learn to master it. But Aileen never understood why registration had to be voluntary. As the city lord, Rocky could simply issue an order about what he wanted the residents to do, and who in the town would dare to disobey the city lord's command. One must remember, in this era, the residents of Sky City do not look up and see the sky. It is the city lord of Sky City who is their sky. N/O/vel/B//and .C//om. Yet, Rocky did not do so. He insisted on having the residents sign up voluntarily, a practice Aileen could not understand. A twisted melon is not sweet. Eileen's misunderstanding was something that Rocky actually understood quite well. In fact, he really could make everyone in the city learn the new technology with a single command, but he did not wish to do so. It was not because of kindness, but because he had a longer-term plan in mind. He hoped to use this reform to cultivate the residents' initiative, allowing them to voluntarily accept and even proactively seek reform, as that would make future matters easier to handle. So, after pondering for a moment, Rocky said to Aileen, "Aileen, immediately send someone to change the announcement. Tell the residents that the deadline for this training session is 1 week from now. After this time, they will have to wait for the next session." "This? Sir? Are you sure we should do this?" Rocky's words caused Eileen's eyes to widen in disbelief. The current situation was that no one was willing to attend the training classes. Under such circumstances, setting a registration deadline would only reduce attendance even more, Aileen thought, finding herself increasingly unable to understand Rocky's ideas. Yet, faced with her confusion, Rocky did not offer much of an explanation. He only asked Aileen to follow his instructions, believing that it would not take long, at most after the first training session, for the residents of Thunderhawk City to change their minds about the training. "Sir." Just then, as Rocky and Aileen were discussing the training class, Lilia hurried over. "Lilia, what's the matter?" Seeing Lilia hurrying towards him, Rocky frowned. She should be with the Guard Corps at this time, so why had she suddenly come to him? By now, Lilia had reached Rocky, and then she said to him with a smile, "Sir, Monty is leaving." Since the last misunderstanding occurred, Monty and Rocky began to drift apart, despite Rocky not leaving Eternal City ahead of time. But in the following days, he didn't continue to follow Rocky. From then on, the two of them barely spoke to each other anymore. And as soon as he returned to Thunderhawk City, Monty went to find Lilia and told her he was leaving. It was clear that the previous incident had greatly disappointed Monty with Rocky, to the point where he even cast aside the thought of observing Thunderhawk City for a while, and he planned to take his leave as soon as he returned. Although Lilia was well aware that Monty had misunderstood the weapon, she couldn't explain it to him, so she had no choice but to go to Rocky. "You go bring Monty to the City Lord's mansion. Come directly to the lab to see me." "Research? Rocky, are you going to?" Upon hearing Rocky's words, Lilia was slightly taken aback, because she was the only one who could understand the meaning of his words, that N/O/vel/B//and C//om. "Go, I have it figured out." Without giving Lilia a detailed explanation, Rocky simply told her to bring Monty according to his instructions. Monty's departure wasn't a surprise to anyone, at least not to Rocky, for Monty's character was easy to predict. As a beast man, he had no interest in beating around the bush. It was perfectly normal for him to part ways when their paths no longer aligned. However, regarding the misunderstanding between the two, Rocky naturally had a way to clear it up. After instructing Lilia, he also turned to Aileen. "Aileen, don't leave just yet. Come with me to the lab. I have something to tell both of you." "Okay." At this time, Aileen had been ready to leave since she still had work to do. But, after hearing what Rocky said, she too decided to stay, feeling somewhat curious. When had a research lab appeared in the City Lord's mansion? This was the first Lilia had heard of it, and she couldn't help but feel curious. Afterward, Lilia went to find Monty, while Rocky took Aileen to his own lab ahead of them. It didn't take long before he brought Aileen into the lab, and just as they stepped through the door, Aileen was stunned by everything she saw. Rocky's lab was filled with various research instruments, which wouldn't have been unusual, but as a shrewd merchant with vision far beyond ordinary people, Aileen realized at a glance that these instruments didn't belong to the current era. They were all from the land era. This discovery took Eileen aback, and as she inspected more closely, she noticed that the room also contained numerous weapons and pieces of equipment that seemed to be used for research purposes. Even Rocky's void magic armor was displayed in the room. Even the void magic armor was being used. What on earth was Rocky researching? The scenes before her were astonishing to Eileen, and how astute was she? After a brief moment of shock, she quickly understood why Rocky had brought her here. And just thinking about what Rocky might be about to do made Eileen's heart start to pound furiously. She felt that a significant event was about to unfold today, one that could deeply affect her. Take a seat wherever you like. At this moment, Rocky, who had brought her to the lab, didn't say much, just telling Eileen to take a seat anywhere, clearly intending to speak once everyone had arrived. Not long after, the door to the lab was pushed open again. Lilia arrived with Monty. Unlike Eileen, who was meticulous and extremely smart, Monty, brought by Lilia, did not notice the extraordinariness of the lab. He merely glanced at Rocky upon entering the lab and then silently stood aside. Now that everyone's here, once Monty was brought in, Rocky stood opposite the few of them. Without any pleasantries, he picked up the rune longsword and slowly began. This long sword, I found it at a lost research institute on the land. With just this simple sentence, Eileen and Monty facing him were both stunned. This longsword has no name, but I think it can be called a rune sword because those patterns on the sword are called mana runes. Rocky ignored the stunned looks on both Eileen and Monty's faces and, as he spoke, activated the mana runes on the sword. In an instant, the long sword in his hand shone brightly, and at the same time, with a gentle flick of his wrist, a slash of sword light appeared before everyone. These mana runes were invented by a master named Wincell during the Land Era to replace magic stones. After saying this, Rocky finally turned to look at Eileen and Monty, just in time to see their faces as they gasped in shock. In fact, from the moment Rocky began speaking, both of them had been stunned. And when Rocky mentioned the mana runes, both the anticipating Eileen and the utterly unprepared Monty couldn't help but gasp. Mana runes? Could it be top-notch magic technology from the Lost Research Institute? That was what Rocky had just meant, right? They hadn't misunderstood, had they? Thinking back on everything Rocky had just said, although the information was succinct, it left them both stunned for a long while, even doubting their own understanding. And if they had understood correctly, then this was too shocking for both Eileen and Monty. The two of them, one a supremely intelligent merchant and the other an experienced demon hunter, did not need Rocky to explain in detail the uses of mana runes. They had already realized the immense potential of this technology. So when Rocky looked at them, they also looked back at him, faces full of disbelief. They had never imagined that Rocky would possess such a potent technology with such potential. They were even more astonished that Rocky would so casually disclose this to them, knowing well that if such a thing were made known, it could cause a stir across the entire sky. At that moment, Rocky continued to speak, explaining in detail the various potential uses of the mana runes to Eileen and Monty. And when he finished, the Eileen and Monty standing opposite him were completely dumbfounded, standing still as if they had crashed, their minds a blank slate. "My lord, you shouldn't have told us this," Eileen whispered uncontrollably. She not only felt Rocky shouldn't have disclosed this, but even thought she shouldn't have heard it, because even hearing it could bring disaster upon oneself. "I know." Eileen's whispered words, however, were heard by Rocky. He showed a face full of helplessness and said with great self-mockery, "Such top-notch technology, falling into the hands of a city lord like me, does seem like a bad thing indeed." With a self-deprecating smile, Rocky then looked at Eileen and Monty. "I also know that if this gets out, it's over for me and Thunderhawk City. I've even thought more than once about just selling the mana runes as a commodity. At least that way, I could save my life. But every time I think about it, I feel unwilling." As he spoke, the expression on Rocky's face changed. The helplessness and self-mockery disappeared in an instant. "I'm unwilling to forever be a small city lord. I'm unwilling to let my city be forever bullied. I'm unwilling to live such a mediocre life. So, I want to take a gamble. I want to take a gamble with the mana runes. I want to use the mana runes to let Thunderhawk City soar in the sky. I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with the giant beasts in the sky, with the demons on the land. But I can't do it, not alone. Having said this, Rocky looked towards Aileen and Monty. Therefore, I've decided to tell you everything, without holding anything back. I hope you will help me. On this day, Rocky did something extremely dangerous, the risk level of which far surpassed that of hunting demons, and also exceeded all missions of the Mercenary Guild, which was sharing the secret of the Mana Rune with Aileen and Monty. His actions were, to say the least, unexpected by everyone. Even Aileen and Monty themselves had not anticipated hearing such explosive news. It was an action of extreme danger, because if either of the two were to leak everything they had heard, there would only be 3 words to describe the fate of Rocky and Thunderhawk City: utter annihilation. Yet, at the same time, this move was within reason, because Rocky needed his own foundation. Only with his own foundation could he then freely develop and become stronger. And the foundation he chose was Lilia, Aileen, and Monty. There was no need to mention Lilia. Rocky absolutely trusted her, so that was beyond question. As for Aileen and Monty, after interacting with them for a period of time, Rocky also deemed them trustworthy. This was precisely where his audacity lay, because in Rocky's eyes, although Aileen and Monty were trustworthy, they did not reach the level of absolute trust he had in Lilia. Still, he shared his greatest secret with the two of them, because Rocky knew one thing: excessive caution is tantamount to groundless suspicion, and once you fall into that vicious cycle, there is no one left to trust. In this situation, he decided to take a gamble. He bet that he had not misjudged these two people, and that his trust had not been misplaced. The silence in the research room had become profound at some point. After Rocky had finished speaking, he did not continue, merely watching Aileen and Monty as if waiting for them to digest everything they had heard. Indeed, Aileen and Monty truly needed time to process everything in their minds, and with their intelligence and experience, they had understood Rocky's intentions as soon as he finished speaking. However, this was a matter they had to consider very carefully, because once they made their choice, it could potentially affect the rest of their lives. Therefore, neither spoke up immediately, falling into silence together. As time ticked by, after more than 10 minutes had passed, Monty was the first to make his choice. He looked at Rocky, then slowly knelt on one knee before him. "City Lord, Beastman Monty swears loyalty to you. I am willing to be the spear in your hand, or the shield. I vow to follow you and never betray you." Beastman Monty swore loyalty to Rocky, and after he made his oath, Aileen also made her choice. She too knelt on one knee before Rocky like Monty did and pronounced her vow. "City Lord, Aileen wishes to swear loyalty to you. Your ambitions are my goals, your dreams my desires. I will follow you, never to leave or forsake you." Aileen swore loyalty to Rocky. "City Lord, Lilia swears loyalty to you. I am willing to be by your side forever, to follow your footsteps ceaselessly." After Aileen and Monty had consecutively sworn loyalty to Rocky, Lilia also knelt before him and spoke her vow. With this, Lilia, Aileen, and Monty, all 3 had sworn loyalty to Rocky. They were henceforth known as the most valiant, astute, and loyal trio under the Master of Runes. And at this moment, their legend was born. At the same time, these 3 giants would not know that many years later, the vows they made today would come to be known as the Oath of Spear and Shield, the Oath of Heart and Desire, and the Eternal Oath, and would spread to every corner of the skies, becoming the standard for all pledges. Of course, all of this would happen many years from now, and at the moment, not the 3 of them, nor Rocky, who would be later honored as the Master of Runes, knew what the future would hold for them. The current Rocky was simply elated, very much so. So, he then helped the 3 who were kneeling before him to their feet, and in turn, gave each one of them an embrace from the City Lord. Alright, now it's time to talk about serious matters. After giving each of the 3 a big hug, Rocky opened up his floodgates of speech. He actually had many ideas about their future development, including Thunderhawk City, how they were going to survive in the skies, and even the Mannaroon. In short, Rocky had many thoughts. But before this, he could only confide in Lilia alone. However, everyone has their expertise, and even though Lilia understood Rocky well, she was not adept at everything, so she couldn't always help Rocky. But now, things had gotten better. Not only did Rocky have Lilia by his side, but he also had Aileen and Monty, so he could share many of his ideas with them. Therefore, following this, the four of them held a candid conversation in the research lab, without any secrets or schemes, talking from day to night about all sorts of things. Immediate plans and long-term goals alike, they chatted about a great many topics. After this in-depth conversation, Rocky became much clearer about what he needed to do next and how he was going to do it. At the same time, his relationship with Aileen and Monty grew much closer because of the talk. So when the next day arrived, it might have seemed like nothing had changed in Thunderhawk City. But in fact, changes were silently taking place. For instance, the Guard Corps had a new instructor. This instructor, naturally, was Monty. Actually, Rocky's idea was to have Monty take over Lilia's position and become the new captain of the guards, which was also what Lilia hoped for. But this needed to happen gradually. Monty was different from Lilia. While Lilia was the personal guard of the city lord, and her status naturally earned her everyone's respect, coupled with her strength and beauty, which had facilitated a smooth transition when she took over the Guard Corps. Monty, however, arrived in Thunderhawk City as an outsider. Even though he was stronger than Lilia, he couldn't come close to her in terms of prestige. Appointing him directly as the captain of the guards would have caused unnecessary trouble for Monty. So, Rocky came up with a solution. He let Monty start as an instructor for the Guard Corps. This way, while training the guards, he could simultaneously establish his own prestige in their hearts, paving a natural way for his eventual promotion to captain. Meanwhile, as Monty became the new instructor for the Thunderhawk City Guards and began training the Guard Corps, the training classes finally started to gain some traction. Strangely enough, despite the lack of initial interest in the training classes, once Rocky set a registration deadline, people began signing up. Although the number wasn't large, with only a dozen or so participants, the result was still far beyond Eileen's expectations and left her puzzled. You could think of this tactic as like a sale. When Aileen voiced her confusion to Rocky, he responded, "Imagine this. If a product permanently drops in price, people won't rush to buy it because the sale is forever, right? They can buy it any time when they really need it. But if a product is on a limited time sale, people's desire to purchase intensifies because if they don't buy now, they might not get the chance later." The same principle applies to the training classes. Setting a deadline for registration naturally boosts the residents' desire to sign up. So that's how it works. Why didn't I think of that before? NOVLB //JNN. After Rocky explained, Aileen understood the situation and nodded thoughtfully. "How are things going with the food?" At this point, Rocky inquired. "Oh, everything has been taken care of. We'll start selling food to the residents next month with the same prices as before. Once all the food is sold to the residents, funds will flow back, and we should have enough money for buying yarn for the next quarter." A week had passed since they left Eternal City, and the Ruby Chamber of Commerce had already delivered the food to the city, while Aileen had managed all these matters properly. Excellent. Upon hearing Eileen's report, Rocky nodded in satisfaction. Although he had initiated reforms in Thunderhawk City, it would take time to see actual results, so in the meantime, the city needed to continue operating in the old way without any mishaps. By the way, Rocky nodded, then suddenly remembered another matter. Any news from the Azure Commerce Guild? They should be arriving soon, right? Soon? Upon mentioning the Azure Commerce Guild, a smile appeared on Eileen's face. They've already sent word. They should arrive with the food in a week, and the one leading the team is that Jiashi. Good. I'll leave this matter to you then. After looking at Aileen, Rocky chuckled. After leaving the Eternal City, everything in Thunderhawk City returned to normal, and everything was running smoothly and orderly. However, in reality, subtle changes were quietly taking place in Thunderhawk City, changes that were unnoticed by many because they were too minor. Probably only those who were driving these changes could perceive everything that was happening, but these changes were indeed occurring. Monty, who had sworn loyalty to Rocky, had taken up his post successfully. He became the new instructor of the Thunderhawk City Guard Squad and began targeted training of the Guard Corps with Lilia's help. At the same time, the leather crafting training class had also started. When the registration for the training class ended, the number of participants in the first session stopped at 13, which meant that in a city with a population of 1,000, only about 1% of the population participated in the training. This number was obviously much lower than what Rocky and Aileen had expected. But even so, the training class started as scheduled, and the first step in the economic reform of Thunderhawk City was taken. Perhaps this step seemed small, but it was taken nonetheless. Thunderhawk City was changing silently like this, a change that might not seem effective now, but it would be enough to affect everyone soon enough. As for Rocky, the city lord, he was quite busy these days. Although everything in the city was running smoothly, he was still very busy because he was preparing for his next goal. Just as he had meticulously prepared for the successful hunting of demons before, Rocky now set his next goal on the tasks of the Mercenary Guild. The training Monty was conducting for the Guard Corps was for this purpose, and he too was swamped with work because of it. He had to draw up a batch of rune equipment for the city's Guard Corps by himself. As mentioned before, Rocky had spent thousands of gold coins buying a large amount of fake magic energy equipment to use these fake items to cover the truth, taking the opportunity to utilize the function of the mana runes. And what he had to do was to inscribe true runes onto the fake magic energy equipment. But that's over 100 pieces of equipment, 100 shields, plus 100 sets of armor. Rocky had to inscribe runes on all 200 pieces of equipment, and not just 1 or 2 runes per item. He needed to inscribe a significant number of runes on each piece of equipment to make them truly effective. According to the conversion of mana points, a small magic stone contains mana equivalent to 40 energy value points, while a first-level magic energy rune has an energy value of only 1 point. This means if one wants to make a piece of rune equipment reach the effect of 1 star, they must inscribe at least 40 first-level runes on it. This is a huge undertaking indeed. 1 piece of equipment needs 40 runes, 10 pieces would need 400, 100 pieces would be 4,000, and 200 pieces of equipment would be 8,000. The thought of having to inscribe so many runes made Rocky's head spin, and he acutely realized the limitations of first-level runes, which was that they contained too little mana. If Rocky had mastered the level 2 mana runes now, his task would be much simpler, as the energy value contained in a level 2 mana rune is 15 points. This means he would only need to inscribe 3 level 2 runes on the equipment to achieve the effect of 1-star magic energy gear. Unfortunately, Rocky was not yet able to learn second-level runes. His magic level was too low, and only third-level mages could inscribe level 2 mana runes, while Rocky was still a first-level mage. In this situation, he had no shortcuts to take and had to honestly stay in the laboratory, inscribing runes day and night. But fortunately, there was nothing in Thunderhawk City that needed his worries at the moment. And with the help of Lilia, Aileen, and Monty, he didn't need to concern himself with the minor affairs of the city, allowing him to work in peace as a diligent little worker. And as time passed day by day, a week went by in the blink of an eye. A week later, Thunderhawk City Skyport was suddenly graced with the arrival of 5 skyships, all of them merchant vessels, N/O/Vel/ B// and at C//OM. After making their appearance, these 5 merchant ships slowly descended within the skyport. Shortly thereafter, a man disembarked, surrounded by a crowd. This man was none other than Jiashi, and these 5 ships were the very grain transport vessels from the Azure Commerce Guild. In fact, as soon as Rocky returned from Eternal City, he had already received news of the Azure Commerce Guild's arrival. No, it would be more accurate to say he had actively arranged for the Azure Commerce Guild to transport the grain, even though Aileen had already purchased all the grain from the Ruby Chamber of Commerce by the time he made this decision. Still, Rocky let the people from the Azure Commerce Guild come. As for why, it didn't seem to be too important, at least that's what Rocky believed. As he got off the merchant ship, with a crowd escorting him, Jiashi's smile froze, and he looked around bewildered. He had disembarked to find the place empty, not a soul to welcome him. This scene left Jiashi both dumbfounded and utterly unprepared. According to his estimation, upon his arrival in Thunderhawk City, the reception ought to have been even more grandiose than the last time, even expecting Rocky, the city lord himself, to come in person. After all, he was bringing grain this time. Was there anything in this world more important, more deserving of attention than grain? Moreover, after the last negotiation, Joshi felt that the city lord of Thunderhawk City, provided he was not a fool, would have guessed that following the rise in yarn prices, the price of grain was bound to increase. Shouldn't the city lord understand, then, how crucial it was to curry favor with him? After all, with just a word from him, Thunderhawk City could potentially save tens of thousands of gold coins. For this reason, Joshi had employed a little trick. He deliberately delayed his arrival by a few days to make Thunderhawk City anxious, thus gaining more bargaining power upon his arrival. But to his astonishment, the reception at Thunderhawk City was so lackluster. There wasn't even a person to meet him. "Hey, you come here!" After a moment of stunned silence, Joshi shouted angrily for a guard, then furiously asked, "Where is your city lord? And what about that Aileen? Why aren't they here to welcome me?" The guard he called over was none other than Feli, who was in charge of the skyport. Facing Joshi's intimidating presence, Feli quickly tried to appease him with a nervous smile. "Overseer Joshi, please don't be angry. The city lord and the finance officer were really tied up with matters today. That's why they couldn't come to meet you. However, the lord has arranged for a carriage and ordered us to take you to the city lord's mansion as soon as you arrived." As he spoke, a carriage indeed pulled up in front of Joshi, clearly having been waiting there for him. Humph. Seeing the carriage before him, Joshi huffed coldly. Although he was very angry, he knew he was here for business, so he boarded the carriage with an air of displeasure. However, once he was inside the carriage, he had already made up his mind. He decided to raise the price of grain by another 10% to give Rocky a shock. That would be the only way to appease his anger.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.